Notre Dame fans, welcome. Welcome to the first edition of our new Monday recruiting show at Irish Breakdown. My name is Brian Driscoll. I'm the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. That guy right there is our new director of recruiting, Ryan Roberts. Ryan has been incredibly busy trying to get updates and get his feet wet. He's got a lot faster than he's done it a lot faster than I thought. So I was like, you know what? Let's kick this show off a week earlier than I intended. So this is going to be the first installment. And Ryan, we can't start a new recruiting show. This is going to be every Monday. It's going to be our new recruiting show where we're going to talk about the latest and kind of some topics about recruiting. We'll give ideas on or give you the latest on certain recruits. And here's the latest here. Here's the latest there. But we couldn't do our first show and not talk about quarterbacks. We have to talk about quarterbacks. And so that's going to be the topic of today's show. So, Brian, this is going to be fun, man. I'm still excited. I mean, I know it's been like almost 2 weeks now since you officially started, but I'm still fired up, man. I'm still ready to rock and roll with you.
Yeah, man, it's been crazy. You know how quickly I feel like things have just gotten on the roll here. But like you said, got to start talking about quarterbacks. It's a interesting cycle at the position, to say the least, for Notre Dame. And I know a lot of people are kind of just standing on the edge a little bit, just wondering how things are going to kind of shake out. So it makes complete sense that we would start here, because I think that's just going to be a lot of volatility potentially in this quarterback cycle right now, which is fun.
This. Let's just kind of dive right in. First of all, big picture.
Yep.
Notre Dame has to get a big time quarterback in this class. They have to. And when you look at it, the last 5 cycles, they've landed 2 big-time quarterbacks, in my opinion. One of them they chased out of town. That's Phil Dracovic. He's gone, okay?
Yep.
And then after that, you've got Tyler Buchner, who I believe can be a big-time quarterback. I believe you do as well.
Correct.
Drew Pine's a good player. I like Drew Pine. He's not – and when we talk about big-time quarterback, we're talking about a guy that can put a team on his shoulders and carry him to victory, right? Like, to me – there's a difference between Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence and Mac Jones. Mac Jones was a heck of a quarterback, but Mac Jones needed to be surrounded by great talent, and he was a perfect point guard for that talent, in my opinion.
Right.
Trevor Lawrence, and for example, Mac Jones couldn't do in a semifinal game what Trevor Lawrence did in 2019 against Ohio State, which is, okay, you don't want to catch the ball, you guys don't want to block, you want to do this, fine. I'm going to take this thing over and do it myself.
Sure.
And that's the difference. I think Drew Pine can be sort of a Mac Jones type of player. I'm not saying he's going to be Mac Jones and be the number 15 overall pick and Heisman. I'm just saying like that type of player that if you put good talent around him, he can go win you a bunch of games. Tyler Buchner, I believe, I'm all for that. Tyler Buchner, I believe, is someone who can put a team on his shoulders. They have one of those. If he gets hurt, doesn't pan out, or he's going to be a sophomore next year. His eligibility clock is already ticking. He played over 4 games this year. Yep. You've got him for 3 more years. 2023 needs to be that year where they start the cycle in regards to landing big-time quarterbacks. This is, to me, a deep, deep year at quarterback, and I'll explain why I think that matters for Notre Dame, Ryan. But at the end of the day, if this thing is going to start really getting over the hump, really taking that next step, as a program, you have to start getting consistently more big-time quarterbacks.
And I agree completely because, especially when you look at how the last couple cycles have gone, because you mentioned Tyler Buchner. Now, obviously, that is to be determined on how he is developed a part of the Notre Dame, the Notre Dame lineage here. But I am a big fan of Tyler. I think that he can be a star caliber quarterback at the college level. But then last cycle, you take Steve Angeli, who is a solid football player, a good football player, could potentially play on the college level, but he's not a guy that's ideally a starting quarterback at Notre Dame. Like, let's just be very honest about that. And that's okay to take that kid every once in a while when you have the separation. Every couple of years, you land an elite guy, and then, the middle guy who you're hoping stays for a little bit is going to be that player who's just a good, solid player. More than not, you want him to be a backup, though, which is fantastic. But then if you're going to get into this cycle where if you miss out on a couple guys and then you end up having to take another lower tier signal caller, then not only are you putting a lot of pressure on Tyler Buchner and the staff to develop him properly and to be the player we think he can be, now you're putting all your eggs into next year's cycle, the year after that. So you're putting added pressure on you, and the separation is going to start to get a little questionable. There's going to be some years where, hey, maybe you finally got an elite quarterback recruit, but maybe you don't have a guy that could be that bridge for a year, that could be like a really good player, and then we'll get the dominant player. Now we're dealing with like middling quarterbacks for a year in that bridge, because not a lot of those guys are good enough to come in as true freshmen and play right away. Like, it doesn't happen very often. You mentioned Trevor Lawrence, who is an anomaly. There's those guys that come around every once in a blue moon that can be that guy as soon as they walk on campus. But I really don't want it to get into the position where we have to force a freshman's hand to being the savior, instead of letting them develop and hopefully, get that bridge year to being potentially what they are.
Because it's not a guarantee that Tyler Buchner is going to be here 4 years, just like it's not a guarantee that he's going to be a star. Right. We don't know either one of those things right now. It's like, if he's as good as we think he can be, maybe he's gone in 2 years. I mean, that's the part of this too. And like you said, you don't want to throw a true freshman quarterback into a situation. You can't guarantee in 2024 that True Pine or Tyler Buchner is going to be here. You can't guarantee it. And you don't want to be throwing a freshman into the mix, because, as you said, Trevor Lawrence is the unicorn of this conversation.
Right.
You just don't see that very often. Second-year players, far more frequent. We've seen that a lot.
Sure.
We've seen that with going back, Jameis Winston, Tim Tebow won the Heisman. A lot of those were Michael Vick, going back all the way to 1999 as a redshirt freshman, took Virginia Tech to the national title game as a redshirt freshman, meaning a second-year player. Yep. And so it's also, here's the other aspect of this. We talk about how Notre Dame's a quarterback away. Here's the other part to me, and this is where I'm going to dive into this. There's some really good quarterbacks on the board this year. Notre Dame likes Jackson Arnold. They like him a lot. They like Chris Vizina. They're good football players. If either one of those kids end up in the class, that's a big pickup for Notre Dame. Right now, both are trending in other directions, but it's kind of like whenever a Notre Dame kid commits to Notre Dame, fans kind of panic, like, oh, who's going to flip them? But whenever a kid commits somewhere else, it's like, oh, done deal, they're out of it. Like, look, Notre Dame is Notre Dame now, right? They're going to be able to try to flip kids too. So don't panic just because the kid commits somewhere else. It's like you're just panicking no matter what. If a kid commits somewhere else, you panic because you're not going to get him. If he commits to Notre Dame, you're going to panic because you think people are going to flip him, okay? So if there's plenty of kids that you can try to flip down the road, here's the stance that I'm going to take, however. And we'll talk about Jackson Arnold and Chris Vizina at some point in the show, but I want to focus, Ryan, on Dante Moore. And here's the case I'm going to make, the statement I'm going to make. Notre Dame needs to 100% go, and I'm going to write an article about this too. They need to be all in on Dante Moore for a number of reasons. Number one, he's an elite quarterback. In my opinion, he's as good as anybody in this class. Him, Malachi Nelson, to me, are the two best quarterbacks in this class. Better than Arch Manning, better than Nico, better than any of those guys, in my opinion. He's 2 hours down the road in Detroit, 2.5 hours down the road in Detroit. He's a very intelligent kid. He's a Notre Dame fit in a lot of ways. And to me, if you're going to be a big-time program, if you're going to be a national championship caliber program, if you're going to be an elite recruiting staff, if you're going to be a top young, whiz kid quarterbacks coach / OC like Tommy Rees, if you're going to be an elite recruiting head coach like Marcus Freeman, this is the kind of kid you have to get. And the problem that we're running into, and I think this is happening at Notre Dame a little bit, in my opinion, and I think that it's definitely happening with Notre Dame fans, is we want to talk about the need to get a big-time quarterback, but anytime it doesn't look like it's guaranteed going to happen, we want to panic and go after the next kid who's a good player, but not an elite player. Jackson Arnold is a really good football player. Chris Vizina is a really good football player. They're not elite players, and they're not Dante Moore. So you can't say, got to go get a kid, because other than a kid being from South Bend or Fort Wayne, there's really not a better – there's really not a closer place you're going to have to find a quarterback that's an elite quarterback like Dante Moore. You have to go all in. You have to be willing to see this thing through. You have to not panic. And the fact that it's such a deep quarterback class is another reason you can take a chance, because there's two ways to look at the deep class. One is well, it's a deep class. We can get other top 100 quarterbacks. Maybe they're not as good as Dante Moore, but they're still pretty good players. The other way to look at it being a deep class is okay, pick the guy you want, go after him. And then if you miss him, because Dante's probably not going to be like a signing day guy. Quarterbacks usually don't wait that long.
Right.
He's probably going to commit no later than the summer, would be my guess. That gives you a lot of time to find another quarterback, to flip a quarterback, to see somebody break out, do all those things if you miss him. Because it's such a deep class, there are other quarterbacks you can turn to down the road. There will be uncommitted kids that are closer to Jackson Arnold and Chris Vizina than they are to Dante Moore that you can go to. Or you can try to flip one of the kids you like now. I mean, look, there's no rule that says when a kid commits, you have to stop recruiting him. So get that out of here, Vince, because he is absolutely fine academically. There's no questions there about academics. So that question is answered. That we don't need to pump the brakes on anything. Dante Moore, academically in every single way possible, is a Notre Dame kid. Okay, so that's a given. But the point is, Ryan, when you have a deep class like this, you have to be willing to go all in on Dante Moore. You have to, and you have to be willing to see it through. If you start panicking, then what you're saying is, I don't have enough confidence in ourselves as a program to go land this kid. You have to me, I'm pushing all the chips to the center of the table on Dante Moore at this point in time.
Well, I don't think that you can take the outlook or the opinion that Notre Dame is a quarterback away and then be okay with them taking a solid, good quarterback, because I completely agree with you. Because on our last show, Jackson Arnold is a top 100 recruit, consensus across the board.
I think he's top 50.
Right. He is a consensus.
I don't see him that way, but I think he's a top 100 kind of guy for sure.
Right. So, we're talking about guys that might be, perceived as plan B type of players that are still high recruits, are still well-regarded, are still talented. Vizina is another good one. In my pecking order, I would say Jackson Arnold would be my second guy. Personally, Vizina would be my third guy. And I think that they're both very talented. But my stance is still, and was last week, is the fact that I think that the separation between those middle-tier quarterbacks is a lot closer than that of a Dante Moore drop-off to whoever your plan B is in the class. If we want things to start turning around and then to make a big jump from a national perspective, you have to do something different. And Dante Moore is different. Like you mentioned, Phil Dracovic and Tyler Buckner, and who are also, great players. But we really need to get established from the ground floor here with the Dante Moore and really take the step. Because I will say this, and I'm not trying to pump this kid up too much, because he still needs to develop and he still needs to get on campus if we do land him and then prove what he is. But it's hard to watch him throw the football and not think that he can't be special, man. Like he is a very natural and very gifted passer. So I would 100%, and we're definitely not going to agree on a lot. Like we're not going to agree on everything, and we're not going to agree on most things, probably, to be honest with you. So, I don't want people to just say, well, that's what I'm saying.
I know people always want this to be like Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp. It's not going to be that show. There's going to be plenty of things we disagree on, but if you disagreed with me a lot, I would question your intelligence, to be completely honest with you. But
all right. That's fair. That's fair.
There's certainly things to be subjective about, but the point is, Ryan, continue. I just want to. Yeah. I hope that we're not disagreeing a lot.
No.
That would make me question your evaluation skills.
Poor choice of words. Brian knows everything. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Oh man.
No. But the point being here, though, is that I agree completely with you about the fact that Dante Moore is the guy that you have to go fully in right now on. You have to play the long game with him. It is what it is for just generally what speaking right now. Because I just think that this is the kid that you need to take a gamble on. You need to take the big push for. If not, then we're going to kind of get back into that same bucket, and we're going to get into a cycle where, again, 2024 is going to be increasingly important, more important than it is 2025. It's great seeing Notre Dame offer a 2025 quarterback. Like it's a change of pace.
And he's really good.
And he's really good. Yeah. And it's a change of pace that we're not used to here, right. Which is, I think, different and sometimes scary. It's sometimes not the best, but I think that this change is for the better, and I'm a big fan of what we're seeing for the next step here. So But the point of that saying was, I don't want us to get stuck that we have to land this 2025 kid. We have to land this 2024 kid.
Because you missed in 2020.
Because we missed, where then we're putting all the pressure on ourselves in the future to make up for that mistake. Dante Moore, I think, is the choice here. It is absolutely the choice because, to your point, it is a deep quarterback class. And I think that this kid is, there's from an academic fit, from an athletic fit, from a location fit, from a cultural fit, personality fit. This kid is one of those guys that checks every single box. Mm-hmm. So you have to this is full court press. Go get your guy if he's your guy.
Right. And here's my stance on look, there's the notion that you've got to get a guy in this 2023 class, right? You've got to get a guy. Notre Dame's got to get a big-time quarterback. You can't miss on a quarterback. That's going to cause you to get to have one of two reactions. Uh-huh. One is to panic and take a guy that's really good but not elite. And in my view, again, this is our opinion, my opinion anyway. I think Ryan agrees with me on this. So you do agree with me on some things, Ryan.
Some things, yep.
Jackson Arnold's a really good football player.
Yep.
Chris Vazina's a really good football player. They're not elite football players. So I'm going to take one of those guys because at least they're really good football players. They're better than what we have in most classes. Okay, that's fine. But the other reaction is it's and this is the correct reaction in my opinion is we've got to get that guy, so we're going to go all in. And the problem is if you miss on a Dante Moore, I believe it starts to facilitate a continued problem. The issue that Notre Dame has in recruiting compared to Bama, Clemson, Ohio State is that Notre Dame hasn't produced big-time quarterbacks. Eventually, you have to kind of get that guy that helps you do that. I mean, Clemson went and got, kind of Taj Boyd started to kind of improve things in a way that I think that Ian Book did for Notre Dame, perception-wise.
Right.
Then you go get Deshaun Watson, and he was the guy that took you over that next step. They didn't have a history of getting guys like Deshaun Watson. They were recruiting, Woody Dancer, Charlie Whitehurst, all the way to Taj Boyd. Taj Boyd was a good football player. I loved watching Taj Boyd. He had 2 huge bowl wins that helped Clemson get over the top as a program, beating LSU after 2012 and beating Ohio State after 2013. But he wasn't an elite quarterback. And that's why they weren't a championship caliber team. They were a lot like Notre Dame is now. Really good, could get to some big games, but couldn't win the big game. Although I would argue that their Orange Bowl win in 2013 with Taj is better than any postseason win that Notre Dame has had.
Yeah.
But they kept, you go out and you get a Deshaun Watson. You got Deshaun Watson when there was a pejorative called Clemsoning, which was meant to say, hey, you can't win the big games. And they still got Deshaun Watson. Getting Deshaun Watson and his success then opens up the door for you to go get Trevor Lawrence, which then opens up the door for insert the next 2 big-time recruits they've landed. So to me, if you miss on him or you're unwilling to go in on him, you're just, to me, continuing what you've done. Because Jackson Arnold being a 50 to 100 type of guy, Vazina being a 50 to 100 type of guy, they've gotten guys like that. Tyler Buckner is that. Drew Pine is that. Brandon Wimbush was that. Phil Dracovic was that, right? They've gotten a lot of guys like that. What they haven't landed since Jimmy Clausen, or actually I'd say since Dane Chris from a recruiting standpoint, but Jimmy Clausen from a guy that turned out to be that kind of guy, they haven't gotten a truly elite, bona fide 5-star quarterback from a ranking standpoint since Dane and Jimmy in back-to-back years. Eventually, you have to kick down that door. This is the target to do that with. Because, again, Brian, you said he checks all the boxes for Notre Dame. Yep. He checks all the boxes. And he's a Midwestern kid. He's a Detroit kid. I was talking to Brian Smith, who we'll have on the show here in a little bit. He's going to talk. He saw Dante this weekend. He's going to kind of tell us what he thought of him and talk some other recruiting things. But so one thing Dante was complaining about is how hot it was down in Florida. Well, that's what you want to hear from a Midwestern kid, right? Like, it's too hot down here. You know what I mean? And this is in January, right? When it's, that's their winter down there. The point is, it's like, if not now, when? Right. If not Dante Moore, when? If you're not willing to go all in on Dante Moore in this quarterback class with where he is and who he is, then when is it going to happen? Because to me, the other part of this too is I think Dante Moore is and this is, I think, the more important conversation. Dante Moore is the perfect quarterback for Notre Dame. And here's what I mean by that. He is athletic and he can run, but he's not a runner.
Sure.
That's what makes him different than Tyler Buchner. With Tyler Buchner, as great as I think he can be, Notre Dame has to alter what I think Tommy Rees wants to do offensively to fit Tyler Buchner's skill set, meaning more designed quarterback runs, using his legs to a greater degree. What I believe Tommy Rees wants is kind of what you see from more of some of the NFL teams that have elite quarterbacks, right? Like the Bills are a little bit of exception because they'll use Josh Allen to run. But when I think of like a Pat Mahomes, and again, I'm not comparing him to Pat Mahomes, I'm just talking stylistically. Okay, what I'm saying is what Tommy Rees wants is a quarterback that can make plays with his legs, but a guy that is a passer first and a passer second, meaning what that means is he can sit in the pocket and shred you. Dante Moore can do that. He's got the mind. He's got great. He understands offenses. He runs a relatively advanced high school offense from what I can tell schematically. He goes through his progressions. He throws with great timing. He throws with great accuracy. He does all those things to be a great pocket passer. He's got a strong arm, all that. When I say passer second, it's when you start to move, you're moving with the thought of, I still want to throw. That's what being a passer second means. And that's what Dante does. He's going to climb the pocket and look to throw before he runs. He's going to get outside of the pocket and look to throw before he runs, right? So that's what being a passer second means. And then a runner third. That ultimately is what Tommy Rees, I think, wants or needs in this offense. Maybe not wants. I don't want to speak for him, but what I think he needs in this offense based on what we've seen him do with his offense since he's been here. And so, like, they hardly ever did design quarterback runs with Ian Book, and he's a guy that I think could have been a runner. And so, to me, this is what Tommy Rees wants. I think Dante Moore is the perfect guy to that because he's part elite talent, part point guard quarterback. He's a point guard quarterback with elite talent, I guess is the way I'm going to say it. And that is the perfect offense for a pro-style offense. And that ultimately, Ryan, is who Tommy Rees wants to be. He wants to be a pro-style spread offense, which means complex concepts, throwing down the field, attacking the middle, being accurate, getting the ball out quickly, all that kind of stuff. And to me, that's what Dante Moore is. He is the perfect player for this offense, combined with local, academically strong, all the different things that make him a great fit. He's a perfect fit. So again, if not now, when? If not him, who? And when we talk about elite quarterbacks. And so with all due respect to Julian Sayin and CJ Carr and some of these other 2024 quarterbacks that I like, none of them looked as good on film as a sophomore as Dante Moore did. You know, now they may develop and be better, but right now, of what you know right now, they're not. And so again, I go back to Notre Dame's strategy from Tommy Rees to Marcus Freeman to the entire staff is all 8 commits. It's like, hey guys, Dante's our guy. Yes, maybe we could go out and get, because like Ryan, some little bit of news, Ryan, about Jackson Arnold. Do you want to just kind of share what it's not earth shattering because it's kind of been hinted about, but just go ahead and share it.
Yeah, just so if you're not on the message board, you definitely should be. So I came, Brian, I think, kind of became aware of it even before this, but I got word this morning that today is the plan for Jackson Arnold to officially make his commitment to the University of Oklahoma. So in theory, Denton, Texas guy or quarterback Jackson Arnold officially off the board for now, but he still plans to take his official visit to Notre Dame. So he's still looking around, but for the time being, he is going to be committing to the Sooners.
Yeah, we believe that. I don't know if he's done it or not yet, but we believe that is going to happen today. That's what we were told today. The point being, you're still going to recruit him. He's still going to visit Notre Dame. What I'm saying is maybe you could go convince him to flip from Oklahoma and take him. Maybe you could.
Sure.
Maybe you could convince Chris Vizina to come to Notre Dame. But my point is that's all fine. I'm willing, and it's a risk, but I'm willing to take the risk to finally say, we've got a 5-star kid that likes us. He raves about his relationship with Tommy Rees. This is the time for Tommy Rees to prove that he's a big-time recruiter. This is the kind of commitment that's going to tell us if Marcus Freeman's truly an elite recruiter and not just an elite defensive recruiter. Okay, because there's a difference. He hasn't shown that he's an elite recruiter as a head coach, meaning because an elite recruiter and head coach has got to do both sides of the ball, right? We don't know that he is that yet. And so he's got to still go prove that. This is your chance to do it. and he's everything you want. He's everything you want in a quarterback, in my opinion, with the exception of maybe 2 inches taller and 15 pounds heavier. That's to me about the only thing. And he doesn't have Josh Allen's arm, but other than the guy that he faced last night, nobody else does either.
Right. Well,
Right.
and I love this show so much because there's so much just talk in the chat, and it's awesome just to kind of see people kind of rolling through. And shout out to Demetrius Rex for the super chat. I want a guy I can root for on Sunday someday. And I agree. Brian always talks about the gap closers, right? Like if a guy is playing football on Sundays, then he's definitely a gap closer. So I agree completely to that. And I saw somebody, Brian, in the chat mention a comparison maybe to Bryce Young with how you were talking about how Dante Moore stylistically approaches the game. And I think that he's on something there when we're talking about pass first, pass second, the ability to run, because it's a really weird world. I don't know if anybody's kind of dove into the draft Twitter world, but people are already talking about Bryce Young, and some people are like, oh, can he run? And I'm like, yeah, Bryce Young can run. He just doesn't
He's
choose
not a
to.
runner.
Right.
He's an athletic kid who's a passing quarterback. Mm-hmm. That's the modern quarterback. That's what Tommy Rees wants.
Absolutely. Yep.
Dante Moore's a much more athletic kid, in my opinion, than even Bryce Young. Because Bryce Young didn't run a ton in high school either. He doesn't like to run. He doesn't like to run. Dante will beat you with his legs. Sure. You know what I mean? Like the comp for him, like he's more Trevor Lawrence than Bryce Young from a style of play standpoint. What Trevor became, in my opinion. Completely different physical skill set. What I mean by that is Trevor, if you were going to take away the pass, Trevor had no problem beating you with his legs. And Dante can do that. But if you ask him how do you want to beat a team, what Dante wants to do is I want to sit back, I want to shred you and throw for 450. That's what he wants to do. And I like that about him. But if you overplay that too much, he's going to run on you and he's going to beat you with his legs. And that's the thing that I like about it, And I mean, he is, to me, he does comp to Bryce Young as a passer in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. It's just Bryce Young played at modern day where he was surrounded by a bunch of other dudes, and Bryce Young's a great quarterback. Don't get me wrong, but it does help to be surrounded by other great players, for sure. So, that's, what do you think of that comparison, Ryan? What are your thoughts on that, on how, on those two kids at that, again, we're talking about as juniors in high school, right?
Right. Well, I would say Dante's obviously a little bit bigger. If we're just obviously talking about the size component, he's a little bit bigger. I think from a passing perspective, I think it's pretty similar in the sense that I think they're very flexible up tops. Speaking of the elasticity of their arms, right? Like they can, you mentioned like they have good velocity. They can hit tight windows, but also I think the ability for them to kind of layer the football down the field, throw from different arm angles, take some touch off a little bit, and kind of hit the intermediate deep portions of the field. I think that they can both do that exceptionally well, and they have that springiness in the pocket for guys that maybe, because I know Moore is listed at like 6'2", so let's just assume that's somewhere relatively in that ballpark.
When I saw him last spring, he looked. It's hard to tell because he's got kind of big hair, right? So but like he looked. I'm 6 foot. He was at least an inch to an inch and a half taller than I was.
Okay, so it's in the ballpark then.
So
it's in the ballpark.
With the hair, he's about 4 to 5 inches taller than I am.
Right.
When the helmet comes on, that doesn't really have an impact. Real quick, Ryan, there's two bits of news that I wanted to report. Jackson Arnold has officially committed to Oklahoma. He did that about 2 minutes ago. And I just published a story at irishbreakdown.com. Notre Dame has made it official that Chancey Stuckey is the new receivers coach at Notre Dame. It's now official, which means, and they also made it official with Harry Heastan. What that means is those guys have now gone through the entire hiring process. Notre Dame has announced them, which means those guys can now hit the ground running. When it comes to getting on the road and those type of things. So that is a bit newsworthy. But anyway, please continue with your comparison here.
Yeah, well, I think the parallels again. I think that natural throwers. I think they're both springy athletes in the pocket, and despite obviously right now Moore is a little skinny, he needs to grow into his frame. But then Bryce Young is just a little short. He's listed at 6 foot. He's probably a hair under 6 foot, probably around 5'11" and some change. But they're both surprisingly good in the pockets, despite their size, and they have kind of a fearless mentality. But they're very springy. They can kind of get in and out of the pocket and really kind of extend things as passers. And they are, like you said, they're more pass first, run to extend the football rather than natural runners, at least from a personality perspective or from a stylistic approach. So those are where the comparisons really lay. I think that I would say, I was going to say arm strength, maybe favor of Moore, but like they might be kind of on par, to be honest, as far as like true velocity. I think obviously the biggest thing is, like you said, Moore probably has a little more juice as a runner, but I, again, wouldn't categorize either one of them as a runner. So I think it's a decent comp. I think that Moore has probably 1.5 to 2 inches on a guy like a Bryce Young, but from a stylistic perspective, I think that they do kind of play like each other, to be honest.
I think that, in my opinion,
Yep.
Dante has more juice, not just as a runner, but also on the 20 to in throws. I think he's got a little bit more zip. What I love about Bryce Young is I think he throws a phenomenal deep ball.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's an area where I would put him a little bit ahead of Dante right now. And he has a real, it's not a powerful arm. That's the thing about Bryce Young. He doesn't have a cannon.
It's natural.
Right. Yeah. But he throws with such great timing that he doesn't have to launch at 70 yards. But he's got a good arm, but he throws a pretty deep ball. It's not as good as Sam Howell's yet, but it's pretty good. And I think that's an area where Dante is still evolving. But from 25 in, I think Dante throws the ball as well as anybody. And it
gets out quick, man. They have compact releases too. Like there is no wasted motion. There's some guys where, like Trevor Lawrence had it to a degree, right? Like he really cocks back, drops his elbow a little bit, and he kind of loads.
Release. That was one of the things arms complained about with him.
Yeah,
and that's something that you have to deal with when this is what people got to understand. When you have a 6'6" quarterback, unless he's got little stubby arms, he's going to have a longer motion. That's just the reality of it, right? I mean, just biomechanics. I mean, he's just going to have a longer release.
Yep.
Dante not being that super long guy, and that's what helps some of these smaller quarterbacks because they can just be like Kyler Murray is able to overcome being 5'10" because he's a great athlete, but he has a lightning fast release, right? Because it's easier to get a shorter armed situation through the throwing zone. And that's the thing with Dante's. I mean, he gets it out quick, but he's also the modern quarterback in that even from the pocket, he can throw off platform and not lose an ounce of accuracy at all. And that is a really important thing. Like we saw Jack Cohn this year working with Phil Simms trying to work on throwing off platform. If you're a fifth-year senior in college and you don't know how to do that yet, you're not going to learn to do it. And that's the thing about Dante's. He just does that naturally. I mean, he looks like that kid that just when he's not playing in a structured situation, he's out, in the neighborhood, playing with the buddies. How playing quarterback in the neighborhood is a whole lot different than playing quarterback on a football field, where you're out there just kind of winging it and doing all that. That's what I like about Dante, but he can do it within the structure of the offense, and he can do it with accuracy. And those are the things that I love about it.
And that's why height's becoming less and less of an issue now because guys can throw from different platforms. They can throw from different arm angles. They find passing windows. Russell Wilson rarely ever gets a pass batted down because he just changes arm slots so much and he finds those windows. That's kind of why the modern quarterback is becoming less and less about heights anymore, right? Because it's just that ability to find those passing windows is much more prevalent than it was. Like nobody cares anymore as much anyway that a guy is 6'4", 6'5". Like we've seen the guys like the Kyler Murrays and the Russell Wilsons and all these guys, Drew Brees. Like Drew Brees never had balls batted at the line of scrimmage because he has the ability to change those slots. And he's not an overly athletic guy. Like he's a smooth athlete, but he's not an overly like springy dude where he's going to run the football. But understanding how to throw from different platforms and different arm angles is extremely important. Did we just take down the 2025 quarterback question?
Did. I'm going to bring it back up when it's time. I don't just hang there for 25 minutes. Like to your point, I would be willing to bet you $20 that if you were to measure them, that Drew Brees releases the ball higher than Phillip Rivers ever did.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, just because of the way that he throws. I mean, he's like here, right? The point being in today's and this is what I think Tommy Rees wants that we haven't seen him have. And now Jackson Arnold has some of that.
Yeah,
but
he does.
He's just not as good as Dante Moore. And so my hope and my fear is that Notre Dame is going to kind of panic a little bit, knowing that maybe they feel that, Jackson will be a kid that they can flip or or Vizina or somebody like that, maybe a guy they can get. Forget all that. Let him go to Oklahoma. Let the other kid go to Clemson or Florida or wherever. Move all the to the center of the table for Dante Moore. I believe it has to happen. And you know, I'm going to say this again. If not now, when? Right. I mean, that's the reality of this. If you can't get a guy like Dante Moore, you're just pushing it off to another year, something we've been saying for years. You know, gee, when's Notre Dame going to be a big-time quarterback? Well, not 2023. No, you need to make it 2023. But it's not just Tommy Rees. Tommy Rees has to do that, but it's got to be Tommy Rees and Marcus Freeman. That's the big thing. And I'm not saying Coach Freeman hasn't gotten involved here. I'm just saying he's going to need to if Notre Dame is going to get this thing going. And and whatever they need to do to make it happen, they got to make it happen, because this is the kind of kid, to me, that if you can follow up a Tyler Buchner with a Dante Moore 2 classes later, with a guy like Steve Angeli in between, that is the kind of recruiting you're going to do at quarterback that's going to make you a great team. The reason I say Angeli is I think a guy like Steve Angeli is a very important player because he's going to stay. You know, he's probably not going to transfer right away. He understands, I got to wait my time. I love Notre Dame. I'm a team player. I'm a leader, knowing that he may get his time. Eventually may transfer, but it's not going to be just because you signed Dante Moore. He's going to want to battle. He's a competitive kid. I want guys like that aren't necessarily 5-star guys. You can't get a 5-star guy every year. What happened at Alabama is a rare thing.
Yes, it
is. We had Tua, Hurts, and Mac Jones on the team together. Most guys, and part of that is because Mac Jones wasn't a 5-star recruit. So he was more willing to wait around. And, you know, so he waited his time, started as a senior, and did a great job. Most 5-star kids aren't waiting that long. They're gonna, you know what I mean? They're just not. And so it's good to get a guy like him. But look, Dante Moore is, to me, I'm going to say it again, the key to saying, okay, we've got this going. And here's the other piece. With all due respect to Jackson Arnold and Chris Vizina, neither one of them are going to be the Pied Piper for this recruiting class that Dante Moore could be.
Right.
That's a big part of this as well.
Yeah.
Really big part of it.
For sure. Yeah, and I mean, I've even spoken to some kids that are already committed, like Adon Schuler and a couple others that are like key cogs in establishing that recruitment on the player side of everything, right? It's so important to find those main guys who can really not only take what is already a strong class in 2023, but take it over the top, make this a true game-changing class, which it potentially could be, which it might already. I mean, it's off to an amazing start. It really is. Like, let's not undersell how 2023 has gone so far. But getting a guy like Dante Moore, because, like, let's call it what it is, man. We're talking quarterbacks today because it's the most important position on the field, not only in football, but in all of sports. There is no position more important than quarterback. Getting a guy like a Dante Moore sells a class for you. Like Carnell Tate, come on down. Other wide receivers that were in, Rodney Gallagher, come on down. Some of these top.
Let me ask you this, Ryan.
Yep.
Does CJ Williams decommit from Notre Dame in 2022 if they have a Dante Moore type of player in the class? No, he probably doesn't. And if he does, you've already replaced him with somebody just as good. That's the whole point. And like, look, each of the last 2 years, Notre Dame's recruiting class has been ranked number 1 or number 2 at some point in time early in the process, right? This class is off to a great start. It's either 1 or 2, depending on who you look at. But being 1 or 2, and again, we're going to assume that the recruiting rankings are accurate, right? You know, everybody knows my stance on recruiting rankings, but I'm just, for argument's sake, let's say they are accurate. Notre Dame starts high because they get a lot of early commitments, and then they start to kind of fall down, and they end up between like 8 to 10, 10 to 12, right, in most years.
Yeah.
And I think both of their last 2 classes were legitimate top 10 classes, but they were 6 to 10 top 10 classes. If they want to get that truly elite, you know, gap closing class top to bottom, a quarterback is a great way to make that happen. Because right now the defense is off to a great start. And you know, we're going to have some stuff this week. You had something, you had an article out today. If you haven't checked it out, another new feature at Irish Breakdown is every Friday, Ryan goes on the premium message board and asks, okay, give me your recruiting questions. And he picks about the, 10 or 12 top ones, and he's going to, on Mondays, publish his answers to those. He had one. There was one that I thought was just too good of an answer to not have as its own article, and that was, your 5 most influential commits that recruits in this class. One of
Yep.
them was Dante Moore. One of them was Jason Moore, the defensive lineman from Maryland. So the point being, I think the defensive class, as good as it is on the verge of getting even better with some of the kids that they're on right now.
For
The
sure.
offensive class is still just has a tight end and a running back that are barely top 250 caliber kids. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So if you're already off to a great start on defense, if you want to add, if you want an offensive class that matches, I think a quarterback is a big part of that. So, I mean, we're just kind of going on and on and on, but the reality is that's what a kid like Dante Moore can do for you. So he's not just going to make you better at quarterback. He's going to make you better at receiver. He's going to make you better on the offensive line because big-time players want to block for a guy like Dante Moore.
For sure.
He's a kid that's gonna say, hey, look, I want to carry the ball with that. I want to run behind that guy, or with that guy. I want to catch balls from that guy. You want to go out and get Carnell Tate? Look, because I'll tell you this, neither of us are necessarily super optimistic that Carnell Tate's going to end up at Notre Dame. I'm more optimistic than you are, but I still think there's a lot of work to be done.
Sure.
But the point is there's a lot of work to be done. I would immediately call Notre Dame Carnell Tate's favorite if they got Dante Moore immediately. Like the minute he committed, if he committed tomorrow, because Cardinals come to Notre Dame. I'd be shocked if he doesn't come to Notre Dame at that point in time. That's just the kind of relationship they have. And it's one of those things where, you got to give Notre Dame, like if you're Carnell Tate and you're looking at Ohio State and you're looking at Notre Dame, you say, well, Ohio State's got CJ Stroud, they've got Kyle McCord, they got Devin Brown, who on 3 just ranked as the number 1 player in the entire country, which I think is insane. To rank that kid as the number 1 player in the country, but whatever. That's a different conversation for a different day. But perception matters. The perception is that he's a 5-star quarterback. And then I'm looking at Notre Dame, and I'm like, Drew Pine and Steve Angeli, and then a kid, Tyler Buckner, that outside perception-wise is just a kid that can run. Now, you and I have a different opinion on that. We have the same, but a different of the outside perception. Which is Tyler can throw. That's not what they need him to do this year. But the perception is reality when you're outside of the program, right?
Yep.
That's just a fact. And a kid like that all of a sudden changes the entire conversation about what the direction of Notre Dame's offense, in my opinion.
Yep. Well, it does.
Another reason to go out.
No, it does extensively because, like you said, we have a bunch of guys on the defensive side of the football, the Keon Keeleys, the Brendan Vernons, the Drake Bowens, the Peyton Bowens, these Justin Retts, like a fantastic defensive class early. But last show, we had a question about who are the guys you're most confident about 2023 that we're going to get right now, like right then. Who are the confident guys? And I had to stretch myself to kind of find a couple offensive guys I feel good about right now. And the nature is, we've had a new wide receiver coach, Coach Stuckey, coming in. We had a change at offensive line coach, Coach Heastan, coming back in. We're still looking for a new running back coach. There's a lot of cogs that are changing on the offensive side of the football from a coaching perspective, which I think is going to slow down the recruitment to a degree because they want to see who the position coach is. They want to get comfortable with that relationship. But also, I don't think that they've done a great job recruiting offensively over the last couple of years comparative to the defense when you're really looking at it. So it needs an uptick. We need a guy, and what is better, and I know that we keep harping on this, and we're all going to be very disappointed if Notre Dame does not land Dante Moore. But he is potentially the beacon for Notre Dame's recruiting class on the offensive side of the football. The defensive class is going to be stellar. As long as we maintain, we keep improving, because Marcus Freeman is going to sell that side of the football. We know that's going to happen. But can a guy like a Dante Moore become a part of this class and take the offensive side of the football to the next level for Notre Dame? That's the big question. I think that he has every opportunity to do it. He is. We always talk about the face of the franchise in the NFL, right? This is the face of a program potentially. I think that he could be that caliber of player for Notre Dame. So we need. I'm really excited about the recruitment to continue to follow it, and it's always a blow when Notre Dame does not get a guy like a Jackson Arnold, because Oklahoma got a good one. Let's not pretend like
good quarterback. He's a top 100 kid. Yeah,
absolutely. Oklahoma got a really good quarterback. But I do think that it is worth it if Notre Dame has the potential to land a guy like a Dante Moore, because I think he is a program changer at the end of the day.
Right. And to me, when I look at the offensive class too, and Dante Moore specifically, I think I think this is a big litmus test for Tommy Rees. And I kind of said this earlier, and I really want to harp on it now, because I think Notre Dame's 2020 and 2019 and 2020 offensive classes were really good, in my opinion. Now, some of them already left, but when you look at the guys that they brought in, obviously Michael Mayer and Chris Tyree in the 2021 class, when you look at the 2020 class or 2020, those guys from the 2020 class, you look at the 2021 class, and you've got Logan Diggs and Audric Estime and Tyler Buckner and Lorenzo Stiles, Deion Colsey, Kane Barong, Jaden Thomas, Blake Fisher, Joe Alt, Rocco Spindler. The reality is a lot of those guys were kind of committed during the Chip Long era.
Right.
You know, Stiles and Colsey committed to Chip Long, and Kane Barong committed to Chip Long. Chip Long was still here when Blake Fisher committed to Notre Dame. And you look at, Michael Mayer committed to Chip Long, right? I mean, Chris Tyree was getting ready to go to Oklahoma until Chip Long jumped in the mix and got him to come to Notre Dame. So the point is, Tommy Rees had a chance for that kind of class in 2022, but he wasn't able to be a part of a situation that held on to C.J. Williams and Amorian Walker. C.J. Williams more so than Amorian Walker. And they just weren't able to kind of close. They weren't able to get that second running back. Now, I love Bryce. I love Jadarian Price. But they clearly wanted a second running back. They tried to get Nicholas Singleton and missed. They tried to get Dallin Hayden and missed. They tried to get Gavin Sawchuk and missed. And so you can say what you want about some of the potential that Tommy Rees has shown as a recruiter, and I think he can be a great recruiter. And he's going to need a better staff around him, right? That's the reality of it. But he's got to go show. You can't blame not getting Dante Moore on your receivers coach or your O-line coach or your running back coach or anybody else. This is on you. And he's done a great job of building a relationship with Dante. And we're going to have Brian Smith on here in a little bit. He's going to talk about, because he talked to Dante this week and down in Florida, and he raves about Tommy Rees. And so that's great. You got yourself in the game. Now it's, do you have the confidence in yourself and the vision of your program to see this one to the end? And I think at the end of the day, they need to do it, because they can flip a kid later. They can go find some kid that kind of emerges, because if you don't get Dante Moore, there's going to be, like I said earlier, there's a lot more kids that are like Jackson Arnold and Chris Vizina than there are kids that are like Dante Moore.
Sure.
And that's where I'm at. I do want to get to this question from Caleb Collins. I'll let you address this one.
It's tough to compare a little bit, just because we're talking about a kid that's 2025 recruit in Bryce Underwood, who they just offered, who is just finished up his true freshman, his freshman season in high school.
Jimmy Clausen, so we can say true freshman versus redshirt freshman in high school. Jimmy was 20 by the time he was, so he is a true high school freshman.
True freshman high school.
Back in the 6th grade, so he could be a year ahead like some of these other kids.
So we're comparing a freshman in high school to what I've seen on film from Moore when he is a junior in high school. So we're talking about 2 years of development, both physically and just from playing ability. But I will say this: it's hard to watch Bryce Underwood and not get extremely excited, because this kid is listed, I think, already at like 6'3", 190. He looks he's pretty tall, man. Like, he's got some long limbs to him. So he's going to develop in that frame. And very well could be 6'4", 6'5", 220 by the time he graduates. Like, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility of high school. And he has natural ability. He is an athlete. Like, we're talking about Dante Moore being a good athlete, which he absolutely is. This kid's a really good athlete for his age. He runs the ball a ton for that team, and he is a natural thrower. So maybe comparative, if we look back to Dante's, maybe he was better as a high school freshman. I don't even know if Dante played as a high school freshman, to be honest with you.
He's physically more advanced than Dante was.
Right.
Stronger arm. He's bigger than Dante now.
Right.
But he has a stronger arm now than Dante did then.
Right.
So,
So the physical tools at the age comparative, probably you would say Bryce Underwood's far and above a guy like a Dante Moore. But it's almost impossible to compare them, because Dante has been playing football for a couple years, and he's a guy that obviously the mental side of everything is what Notre Dame is valuing so heavy right now. And not to undersell his talent level, because the kid has very talented arm, good athletes, advance from a mental perspective. So there's a lot to love about Dante Moore. But Bryce Underwood is an incredibly talented player.
But
So
that's what
could
great
be.
teams do. You get
Yes.
Bryce Young in 2022, then you get the kid, you're Bryce Young. You get Dante Moore in 2023, and then 2 years later, you get a Bryce Underwood, right? And that's the thing is, and so then he shows up. Dante's a junior. Kid redshirts for a year because great quarterbacks, not most great quarterbacks don't have this I need to play as a freshman type of it. Some do. Caleb Williams did, but not all. But even then, he knew he was going to a place that had Spencer Rattler, and you were going to have to battle and all that kind of stuff. Most kids understand, sit a year, and then I start for a couple, and that's how it works. I mean, that's why Bryce Young went to no, when Bryce Young committed to Alabama, there wasn't the Mac Jones is going to leave for that 2020 season, right? I mean, it wasn't that wasn't the case. These kids know they're going to compete. The great ones don't have a problem competing. The kid like Underwood, to me, you bring him in, and then he shows up as a freshman. Dante's a junior. If Dante is the player we think he is, there's not a given that Dante's back that next year.
Right.
And that's kind of how every 2 to 3 years you want to be bringing in another great quarterback if you can. I don't love the back-to-back years because then you end up getting yourself in a situation where one of those kids is going to probably leave. Yeah. And now you're having quarterback numbers issues. So that's that's the thing. And somebody asked, does Notre Dame have a realistic shot at Underwood? He's a freshman in high school.
Who knows?
I mean, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on Bryce Underwood because he's a freshman. I mean, he's got 3 whole years of high school football left, right? He could commit to Notre Dame tomorrow, and I'm like, okay, whatever. That just means he's the guy that's the school that everybody's got to hold off for the next 3 years, right?
Right.
So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. We're going to focus on Dante Moore because he's in the class that matters.
Yeah.
And, look, when a kid that's got 3 years of high school left, there's a lot that's going to happen at Notre Dame before Bryce Underwood ever shows up in college. Right. And so to me, Dante Moore's got to be he's got to be the focus. And that's the commitment they got to win. That's Tom Reese has got to show, hey, forget my age, forget my lack of experience. All that stuff doesn't mean anything. I can get the job done. And obviously we're going to find out if he can do that on the field in the fall. I think he did it. I mean, I think the last 7 to 8 games of Notre Dame this season showed me that he's got the potential to coordinate a really dynamic offense. And he did that without a great offensive line coach, with a very mediocre to bad receivers coach, and injuries and all this other stuff, right, that happened.
Yep.
Now it's time to continue that, but now it's time to show that you can be a big boy on the recruiting trail.
And I will say, to Caleb's point, and Caleb, you should be very excited about Bryce Underwood. He's going to be a fantastic player if he continues the trajectory that he's on. But I would say another thing that helps the potential future recruitment of a guy like Underwood is landing Dante Moore and him being as good as you think he is, because then that makes it a lot more attractive for a quarterback to come to Notre Dame if Dante Moore is what we think he is. So let's get excited about Underwood, but eyes on the prize right now.
And let's explain that, Ryan, because the reality is and I've used this example with Alizé Mack before, right? When he was coming out of high school, it was Alizé Jones at the time.
Yep.
And I said he had committed to UCLA. Notre Dame was trying to flip him, and it came down to this for him. When he visited UCLA, they got on a whiteboard and drew up all the ways that they thought they could use him and how they were going to change their offense for him. When he went to Notre Dame, they popped in film and showed him how they're going to use him. Because at the time, UCLA didn't have really a tight end that was a really pass-catching kind of guy, right? And that was it. Like, okay, I know that they can develop me because I look what they did with Tyler Eifert and Kyle Rudolph and that tradition. Offensive lineman, same way. I'm going to go play for Harry Heastand because I know he can develop me in the first-round pick. How do I know that? Because he's developed more first-round picks than any offensive line coach in college football last decade. Absolutely. Right? And those are the things that to your point, you get a Dante Moore and he has success on top of hopefully Tyler Buchner having success. It now makes it a lot easier to get a Bryce Underwood. It makes it a lot easier to get whoever the next after Bryce Underwood is. It makes those things easier. Like, hey, look, they can develop big time. They can land and develop big time quarterbacks. Because if you look at Notre Dame's tradition now, they've got a lot of 5-star / highly ranked quarterbacks that haven't done a thing. Dane Christ, Gunnar Keel, Brandon Wimbush was just a runner. I mean, Malik Zaire got hurt, started 3 games. He was a top 150 guy. You look at Brandon Wimbush, I mentioned. Phil Dracovic could never beat out Ian Book at Notre Dame. Now, that's the perception.
Yeah.
So that's kind of when you get to it and say, hey, look, these kids want to go somewhere they know that they can be developed. There's a lot of questions about Tommy Rees right now still, outside and inside the Notre Dame fan base. This is one of those things he can do to silence it, because you made the decision not to recruit Drew Aller till it was too late. You made the decision not to recruit Sam Horn, 2 top 50 quarterbacks last year you could have had.
Right.
If you're going to do that, then and you're going to focus on a guy like Angeli, and I think part of that was looking ahead to what was coming down the pipe. Okay, now you got to get those guys. Now it's time to go get those guys.
Well, we had a comment. Maybe if we could touch on it real quick from DMND13, who said, "Would your thoughts or on 2023 strategy be any different if Aller was enrolled at Notre Dame instead of Penn State right now?" Of course, Drew Aller, quarterback in the last cycle. For me, it wouldn't. I don't think it changes your strategy. I just think it makes you okay with the fact that there's a couple other guys. Like you had a guy like Tyler Buckner, and you had now potentially a guy like Notre Dame has a potential at getting a guy like a Dante Moore. If you can get those two, then Angeli, you feel better about a guy like a Steve Angeli. But I would assume that you would always shoot for the best, right? Like we're not going to just be like, oh no, we don't need a good quarterback this year. We're just going to settle for a solid quarterback. I think you always shoot for the best. Ryan,
I think it doubles down on your strategy. Because now we're really okay if you miss Dante Moore. Like if I'm looking at it from like the Notre Dame coaching standpoint, hey, we're okay if we miss Dante Moore and we get a kid like Avery Johnson late because we got Drew Aller or Sam Horn in 2022. I think, so I mean, it's a great question.
It is a great question
about that. But I think the other thing is I would be more accepting of them saying, hey, look, we want to get another quarterback. We like Jackson. We like Chris Vizina. We're going to take one of those guys because we like them, and it's a good guy to complement with Drew Aller. And I think Drew Aller is a really good quarterback. Both all due respect, he's not Dante Moore yet. Now I'll say this: Drew Aller with just physical tools has a chance to be a top 10 and 15 NFL draft pick. He's got a bazooka for an arm. He's a good athlete in the pocket. He's got all the physical tools, but he's a super inaccurate kid. I would have taken him in a heartbeat, but the point is he is far from a sure thing. And to me, it would not have changed my strategy. I would still be all in on Dante Moore because Drew Aller is a really darn good quarterback. He is a top 40 high school football prospect. I still say there's a difference between a guy that's 25 to 40 and a guy that's a top 5 to 10, and that's how I view Dante Moore. So I would have still gone him, and I think getting a Drew Aller or a Sam Horn would have given me more reason to say, hey, we're doubling down. We're going for even better, because that's what recruiting. And we're going to bring Brian Smith on to join the show. Brian, thanks for being with us. This is what champions have done for a long time. This is what the best teams did back when the U was the U. They didn't sign a great corner and say, well, we can take a couple years off. It was, okay, we got this guy. Let's go try to get somebody even better next year. That's what Bama does, right? And they'll say, hey, we're going to take the next 2-3 years off. Unless you get – now, if I would have flipped it, right? I mean, if you get Dante Moore in 2022, maybe you say, okay, we got 2 studs in a row. Maybe you shoot for a guy like that this year. But to me, even then, you've got to bring in a guy, because if we are correct about Dante Moore, and that that remains to be seen. We're not, I think we're pretty good at this, but everybody misses on kids. Sure. If we're correct on Dante Moore, he changes your program, and I don't think Drew Aller necessarily does. As much as I love Drew Aller's upside, I don't think he he's not quite that. And anytime you've got a kid sort of in your backyard, Detroit is I mean, for Notre Dame, that's your backyard, Detroit. You've gotten some legends from Detroit. This is the kind of kid to me that changes your program. So, Brian, you had a chance to see Dante this weekend. You've had a chance to watch a lot of his film. Give me your thoughts on what you think of Dante Moore as a quarterback, because you've been listening to the show. You know what the premise of the show is. And you've been a Notre Dame fan longer than either one of us, because you're older than both of us. What are your thoughts on? I just have to sometimes say that I'm not the oldest guy in the room. That's normally not the case. I just have to take advantage from time to time. Brian, what are your thoughts on Dante Moore as a prospect and just kind of what we've been discussing here?
This is a kid, as you noted, that not only can change your program, but can change it in a hurry. Um, I didn't know much about like his background, and even after talking to him, I had a change in opinion because he's very mature. But the way he plays, he sets up his receivers for success. He will read something, and he'll know that the guy on the right is who he's going to throw to, but he'll wait to the last second, shift his weight and move, keep the safety over to the left, and then throw a bullet. Those are things that high school kids just don't do. It's just true. I don't know who in the world has trained him and how many coaches he's had, but he's very sophisticated in how he carries out his plays. The other thing is they have three quarterbacks in the program. Ironically, it's called Sound Mind, Sound Body. It's a 7-on-7 program that is by far the best in the state of Michigan. Carr, the kid that's the grandson of Lloyd Carr, is on their B team because they have three Division I quarterbacks. It's pretty deep unit. But they have another kid that is from Canada that's really good. So they were rotating series, which is hard on a quarterback. I mean, literally 1-to-1-to-1. I don't like it much, but I don't know what else you do. And he doesn't complain. He goes through his progression. He just does what he's asked, and everybody's always happy about what he does. Everybody on the team respects him. They come to him to ask him questions. It's like he's a coach. It was really weird because I never see that in 7-on-7. 7-on-7 is not very structured, and I'm being kind. Footwork, eye placement, the placement of the ball. He throws everything to the perimeter. This guy can't get it. It's going out of bounds.
Right.
He doesn't leave anything.
He misses with a
what
purpose. That's the thing. And Brian, your audio is it's like it doesn't sound like you're connected a whole lot. Usually it's really good, but we're not really hearing it.
I tell you what, I'll get rid of the earbuds. Maybe they're just not. I don't know.
Okay.
I just got these actually last night, so let me take these out.
To me, an elite quarterback is a guy that, when you talk about elite accuracy, it's not just completion percentage. It's not just, he completed 69 or 72% of his passes. It's number one, having great ball placement, right? Great ball placement is also something you do when you miss. And what I mean by that is when you miss with a purpose. If I'm going to miss this, I'm going to miss outside where it's either my guy gets it or it's out of bounds. I'm going to throw it low so that way if a defender bats it, he's batting it into the ground, or he can tip it, but he can't tip it up or pick it off. Like, it's throwing with purpose, hitting players with purpose, but then missing with purpose. And that's something Dante does that is very, very rare. And you just, like you said, Brian, you look, you're in Florida, you go to these 7-on-7 things all the time. You've been following recruiting you and I remember me and you meeting up for lunch one day back in 2007 talking recruiting. You know what I mean? Like, we've been doing this a long time. Guys that have the football IQ, the acumen, all those kind of things of a Dante Moore just simply do not come along. There's guys that come along every year that have better, just raw physical tools, bigger, faster, stronger arm. But it's not just the physical tools, it's the mental tools that, to me, that separate Dante from everybody else, because he just knows how to play this game at a it's like he's playing at one speed mentally, and everybody else is playing at another speed mentally. And that's, to me, what one of the things that makes him so special.
I think that's why so many of the kids just went out of their way to ask him questions, or he would go to them and make an adjustment. They've got a kid that's committed to Michigan, Samaj Morgan, and he can flat out run. The kid's real mouthy, always mad when he doesn't get the ball. He's that kid. I mean, bad. But he found it was bad. But at the same time, he found a way to get him the ball, do different things to make him happy to the best of his ability when he played. I mean, you want to get so many reps, and he doesn't let it get to him. The other quarterback, they were jawing back and forth. And when the other kid was in the game, even though he had big arm and all that, the chemistry was garbage, and they struggled in the game. They got knocked out of the tournament. Was the one Dante was not playing quarterback. Coincidence? Not so much.
Because you said they were rotating quarterbacks and all that kind of stuff. And
you know, and sometimes they did it during the game. And then there was another one where the kid from Canada played more. they're trying to get him exposure. Like Dante doesn't need any exposure.
Right.
I get it. I get it. But it's not even close. So anyway, to make a long story short, my list is the following. His footwork I like the best because he wouldn't just shift around and throw it in different angles. And I don't care how good it is up top. I know you talk about this when you talk about quarterback play, your hips, your follow through, all that. It starts at the feet. Mm-hmm. His footwork is good. Again, somebody has trained him.
Your feet are going to lead you.
Yes.
The feet have to lead everything else. It's like dancing, right? Your feet lead if your feet aren't good, nothing else, everything else is going to look funky, right? The feet have to lead you through the process.
Then his eyes. He plays off of that because he would literally turn right or left, set him up, safety moves. Then he would come back either if it's not there, check down immediately. No wasted time. Too often the check down, as soon as the guy gets it, he's getting hammered. He gets the ball they had a really athletic kid. They throw a 3-yard pass and get 10 yards. You're still moving the chains. That's how you win football games. Phil Simms once said the most important pass in pro football is the check down. 2nd and 5 never goes out of style.
Right.
So those are the kinds of things that you do, the high school level especially. I mean, the linebackers can't cover anybody in high school. They have no idea what they're doing. He would hit that, and they would just matriculate down the field. And eventually the DBs, and again, this is high school football in the 7-on-7 realm. Somebody makes a mistake, and then Dante's physical talent with his arm hits a kid on a skinny post, and it's touchdown.
Right.
But he wouldn't have got there because there was a few plays that guys are covered, and he checked down. He took the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th option, and they moved the football. Most guys, that would have been a 3 and out, and they would have given points to the other team and lost football. They scored. So in the few times that he was quote unquote off, again, I know this sounds weird, but Mike Hyatt is going to catch it, or it's going to hit somebody out of bounds. I don't care which, but it's not going to the other team. He never threw anything that I went, what are you doing? Every other quarterback at the tournament, and there were 5 or 6 kids that are Power 5 kids at the tournament at quarterback, all had moments like that. I'm like, that's probably not your, and usually over the middle. When you make iffy decisions over the middle, it doesn't end well. He doesn't make those throws. And I was just shocked at how well he was.
But he also is willing to attack the middle of the field.
Oh, yeah.
He'll attack any part of the field, but to your point, he's not going to. I rarely see him throw late over the middle.
Correct.
Like or oh gosh, throw it over the middle. That's when you get picks and things like that. His timing and his willingness to attack over the middle. To your point, he's a patient. It's patience, right?
Correct.
And patience is okay. I'm gonna take the slide, I'm gonna take this, and then the one time you bite up, or you think you got me figured out, that's exactly. And here's an interesting question that we got, and Troy McIntosh asked Jimmy Clausen versus Dante Moore, who is the better prospect. Here's the problem with a question like that is everyone's going to project their feelings about Jimmy at Notre Dame onto Dante onto his evaluation. If we're going to talk high school prospect, Jimmy Clausen is still one of the 3 or 4 best prospects I've ever seen at quarterback. Ronald Curry being the best I've ever seen. Jimmy Clausen is in that conversation. He didn't all of a sudden stop being a great prospect because he wasn't necessarily a great player in 2 of his 3 years at Notre Dame. So Jimmy was elite. Okay. However, here's the way I would look at Dante Moore. Jimmy was from an era where it was still the speed. He is still from what I call the Steve Spurrier era of quarterback playing college football, which was drop back, rhythm, perfect mechanics. And Jimmy was the master of that. We're in a different era of college football now, which is more of the, I don't even know who to define it because it's come from so many ways, but it's the Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen era, meaning Aaron Rodgers era, even though he's older. But the point being, it's not so much drop, rhythm, throw, drop, rhythm, throw. It's throwing off platform. It's like Jimmy Clausen's from the Drew Brees school of football. And Dante Moore is from more of a modern era of college football. And so that has to be taken into consideration of Jimmy was what he was at the time. That's exactly what people were looking for. I will say this, if we're just looking at their God-given skills, Jimmy had a little bit of a stronger arm at the same age, same grade, partly because Jimmy was a year older. But Dante and Jimmy's accuracy is still the best I've ever seen from a high school quarterback. I've still never seen anyone that can put the ball, like that scene from Wedding Crashers. It's first team All-State, I can put the ball wherever I want it. Okay. Jimmy Clausen could do that. I put the ball wherever I want it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm Jimmy Clausen. Dante, to me, is a much better athlete than Jimmy. Mm-hmm. If Jimmy couldn't have a clean pocket, he was in trouble. He wasn't going to climb and do all those kind of things. He needed a clean pocket. Dante doesn't necessarily need a clean pocket. That's the other part about this comparison is, he can throw off platform more effectively. He can use his legs more effectively. I would argue that Dante's personality and leadership ability are better than what Jimmy's was. But I don't think we necessarily knew that about Jimmy at the time. There was no questions about Jimmy's leadership at the time. Those are things we didn't learn until he got to Notre Dame. But I think Dante Moore is kind of what Jimmy Clausen would be if you could fast forward him to 2022, right? In that if he was the prototype accurate quarterback of the 2007 time. Dante Moore is that for his generation, if that makes sense. So I think what they are is very similar, in my opinion.
Well, can I ask you a question, Brian? So if I'm following kind of your train of thought, then would you say that maybe Dante would fit maybe better in both eras, but yes. Jimmy was better in his era, if that makes sense?
100%. 100%. Because in 2007, we were starting to see the spreads kind of come about. Rich Rod was doing it at Clemson, right, with Woody Dantzler, and during that era. We were starting to see that the Dante Moore type was coming along. The reality, however, is Dante wouldn't be throwing like he does now if he was raised in the 2000s. Sure. Right? It just, you didn't train quarterbacks to do what they do now. But if you could take Dante now and put him back in that era, he flat out would fit in that era. Jimmy would still fit in this era. It just would be in fewer offenses. Jimmy Clausen could still run Notre Dame's offense today.
Right.
And, because, again, I mean, if Jack Cohn can run it, what would Jimmy have been able to do in this offense, right? God. But as far as Dante, like, to me, but Jimmy would still have the issues that Jack Cohn had this year, which is when the pocket breaks down, there's not a lot of answers for him. So even then, I think that limitation would still be there. So I think Jimmy could play today's offenses, but at the number of offenses he could play in is fewer. Dante's ability to be an elite passer means he could have gone back to that time and played in any offense. If you're a drop back throw, I mean, he could have played in Charlie Weiss's offense, drop back, throw it around, right? He could have played in the spread offense that they were running at the Clemsons and the Tulanes and the places like that, right? He can run an air raid offense. He can literally run any offense you need him to run, with the exception of an under center. Like, I wouldn't want him running Wisconsin's offense. He could do it, but you wouldn't be using him to play to his potential, right? You want a bigger, prototype kind of guy. But yes, right. I think that point stands. I think Dante could run a lot of offenses in either era. Jimmy's fit in the modern offense is more narrow in what he could do. I don't know if I want him running an air raid, because you have to have some, like an air raid, like a Phil Longo air raid. He could run Mike Leach's offense. You don't think Jimmy Clausen could throw for 6,000 yards in Mike Leach's offense? If Anthony Gordon could throw for over 5,000 yards, what's Jimmy Clausen going to do in that offense, right?
I would love to have seen him at Mississippi State. Oh my God!
Right, but and he could run LSU's offense in 2019. He's not running some of the offenses that are more geared towards movement. Somebody just brought this up. Jimmy in 2020 Bama offense. Exactly right.
100%.
But Jimmy running, Clemson's offense. No, because that offense requires a quarterback to be more mobile. Jimmy running Lincoln Riley's offense. I'd still say no, because that offense still requires, the air raid still requires a little bit of a quarterback that can move. So, but Dante can run any of them. So, I mean, I think it's a good comparison, but honestly, he would be the best commit to Notre Dame, the best high school quarterback commit, in my opinion, from a ranking standpoint, since Jimmy, obviously. And then from a tools, like just as a passer, he would also be just a pure. I mean, I think we could debate who was better at the same age, him or Djokovic. I think we can have that conversation, but Jurkovic's such a different type of player than Dante. You have to have Phil running. If you're taking, and that's the thing I think BC has missed at times with him, is they don't take advantage enough of his running ability, in my opinion. Now they let him kind of scramble around and do all that kind of stuff, but which is good. But Bryce, the reason I think Bryce is even a better fit for Notre Dame, what they do now is Dante is he can sit in the pocket and beat you in a structured offense. I don't think Phil's a structured offense kind of guy.
When I talked to Dante, I asked him before I ever interviewed him or anything else, I said, your own opinion, self-evaluation. It's 3rd down and goal at the 3, and the play call is a read option. Rate yourself 1 to 10 on your ability to run. And he kind of looks at me and he goes, 6, maybe 7. I'm better at throwing it. He was honest.
Yeah.
He's just a sub.
Well, and the thing is, I would rank him higher than that as a runner. But that goes back to the original. No, but that's the thing that goes back to the early part of this conversation that Ryan and I were saying is, in his mind, he's a passer first and a passer second, and a runner third. Right. And what I mean, as I said, just for those who joined the show late, passer first means sitting in the pocket and just eat you up. And Dante's a maestro at that. When I say passer second, it's when you start to move, you're still looking to throw. Dante starts scrambling around from the 3. He's still looking to find somebody open in the end zone. Then runner third. That's his mindset. And to me, if he had a passer first, runner second mindset, I think his answer would have been different. And that mindset's important, but that's what I think ultimately Notre Dame wants in this offense, is a guy that has that mindset, that has way more faith in his arm than he does his legs. Like when you watch Josh, I don't watch a lot of NFL, but I watched the games yesterday.
Jeff fun?
Oh my God. Because I watched the games on Saturday too, and I was like, this is boring. But I watched the games yesterday, and it's just the mindset of the two quarterbacks. Josh Allen has a lot more confidence in his running ability than a lot of other quarterbacks do. And they were calling plays for him to run, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're going to call many designed runs with Dante Moore just because that's not his mindset. Now, he's athletic to do. You watch him play. He can run. He is an athletic kid, but he's not an Everett Golson athlete as a quarterback. He's not that. He's not Malik Zaire. He's not Brandon Wimbush. He is not Tyler Buckner. Mm-hmm. He is a passing quarterback that can run. And that's why he's so important to me. Is that may not be my favorite solid quarterback. That's irrelevant. That is what Tommy Rees, I think, ultimately wants and needs running this offense. And
that's something that when I interviewed him, you'd sent me that text when I was going to the tournament. Hey, if you can get Dante. And I was like, yeah. I asked him about Rees. I had no idea what he was going to say because I've never spoken to the kid. He loves Tommy. And I think one of the reasons that he does is Tommy has a similar concept. Tommy wasn't exactly Mr. Mobility. He has a different look at the way
you made Jimmy Clausen look athletic, okay?
I don't know if I go that far.
Jimmy had a broken foot, and he still was able to play.
Terrible race. Oof, bad. But
go make a sandwich before those two guys would finish a 100-meter race.
That would not have been fun to watch.
Yeah.
He understood what Tommy was talking about, and he openly said, unsolicited, that he had a relationship with Tommy for a couple of years. They obviously got on him really early. He didn't know the date or whatever, and I didn't ask. But he's very comfortable with him. And one of the things has to be what you were just talking about. Are you going to want to go play for somebody or you continue a conversation if you don't look at the offense the same? Well, hell no. It's not fun to go somewhere if you don't fit, be a square peg in a round hole. They're going to be able to use what he does based on, think of the offense this past year and add somebody that you can run some bootlegs and some waggles.
And he can pull it and keep it on a read zone.
Yeah. It may only be two. This is not Tyler Buckner for anybody else. He's athletic, right? Tyler Buckner's a freak. That's different.
Right.
He will, on 3rd down and goal at the 1, if you have a true running back, which right now Notre Dame is doing pretty good at that spot. If that DN crashes, he's going to score. He's going to keep it. He's going to go around the end. Was Jack
Tyler Buckner's answer to the question you asked Dante is different. It's 10. You know, rate yourself as, you know, I mean, he's like, yeah, I mean, Tyler wants the ball in his hand. He wants to run that thing in. And again, that's what we get back to. It's a mindset thing, right?
Oh,
and
hell yeah.
That's part of that too, is again, what ultimately I think Notre Dame wants. I think with Dante, you're going to have to, hey man, you know, it's okay for you to run it there.
Right.
You're outside the pocket. Like you've got room to run, go. You're an athletic kid, go run. But that's just his mindset. But again, I think that's, to your point about Tommy Rees, that's kind of how Tommy was as a quarterback, but more so Tommy views himself, in my opinion, as a pro style kind of guy. Mm-hmm. Meaning I want to run all these different concepts. I want to be able to just drop back and just pick you apart with all these different things. I need a quarterback that's really smart, that makes great decisions, that will sit in the pocket and get rid of the ball. And that's, I mean, there's clips in high school where Dante's willing to stand in there and get hit in the face if it means he's going to get a throw off. And, you know, I don't want him doing that all day, right? But on 3rd and 9 with the game on the line, I want a guy that's willing to stand in there and get hit in the face if he knows it means he's going to get the ball off and complete a pass. And that's who Dante is, in my opinion.
To that point, I think a lot of guys would want to play with him. I heard you mention that earlier. The tournament that I was at this past weekend, and I'm guessing that 95% of the people have zero interest in 7-on-7, but was like the largest collaboration of talent you're going to have this year at the tournament. California, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody knew who he was, even like the South Florida kids. And let me clarify this for people out there. There's the state of Florida prospects, and then there's South Florida, which is its own continent. The Miami, Broward area, that's a whole different world. They, like, some of those kids.
It's the state of Miami, baby.
It is. I mean, I can't explain it in words. You have to experience it. Those people don't pay attention to what's going on. That they have so much going on right there, they don't care. But those kids know where the quarterbacks are. I'm pretty tight with Jalen Brown and his dad, and he runs with a team called Immortals. And he called me right before the show. Like, if Dante played with Immortals, because it's Jalen and literally like the pick of the litter from the Miami public schools at receiver and running back. Now, take a wild guess what kind of athleticism we're talking about right there.
Pretty good. Pretty good. Pretty decent.
They were terrible down the stretch because they didn't have quarterback play. I don't care how good your skill guys are, it's not going to work. There was, like, Jalen's one of the quietest, non-confrontational kids you would ever meet. And the first time I saw him get literally pissed was in the game they lost. There was a bust. He's running down the middle of the field, buck naked, wide open. And the kid never looked at him. He locked in on his first receiver, and he was done. He threw it to a guy that wasn't open with a guy in the middle of the field with no safety. I would be mad too. And there were other plays like that with other guys. And every kid that plays for them has a chance to play at, like, Florida, Iowa, or whatever. So as long as the guy's open, there's going to be a play happen. I mean, it's time to roll the film. But again, if you do not have a man at the trigger, even in 7-on-7, you're done. And, you know, they're not even getting rushed. And some of these kids can't make more than one read. It's hard, but some of these kids freeze. Dante was so calm and cool. When kids see a guy like that, why would you not want to go play? Like, if he picked Texas just randomly, Texas will get another receiver because of Dante Moore. Flat out. You know, that's just how that works. The receivers know the connection. It's part of it. And I know that a lot of these guys probably don't understand all of that, but no two positions are connected more than receiver and quarterback. So getting more sets your program up. And by the way, receiver is the one question mark at Notre Dame going into next year beyond corner because, you know, there's injuries and all that stuff. Adding one receiver every year, getting that extra guy when you get a kid like Moore matters because you don't know when injuries are going to happen.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, Brian, because I want to talk about Jalen Brown. Okay. You know, we already mentioned early in the show, you heard me say that I think if Notre Dame gets Dante Moore, they get Carnell Tate, in my opinion. And you've mentioned Jalen Brown a lot. You've had a chance to get to know him and his father really, really well. You and I have talked. We'll just kind of put it out there. He is not someone he's not your typical South Florida kid where he understands there's a world outside of Miami, and he's, I think, intrigued by that. And you know this. It's kind of a hypothetical because I don't know if you've necessarily had the conversation, but to me, what does getting a Dante Moore do when it comes to Jaylen Brown specifically? Because Jaylen Brown is, I mean, I wear the gap closer shirts. I should have worn it today. Jaylen Brown is a gap closer. I mean, he's a gap eraser, you know, and I believe that a guy like Dante Moore gives you a much better chance of getting that kid. Am I right or am I wrong?
Well, not
specifically
only right,
him, not just in general receivers. I'm talking about Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, like Jaylen is at Gulliver Prep, and just to put a premise in here, that's $30K a year to go there if you're a normal student. I'll say that again, $30K for a high school.
Mm-hmm.
He is not with normal students. When I went to his school Friday to interview him, and I'm standing outside the weight room, I'm like, this is like Princeton, but with some athletes. It was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, of course, it's pristine. It's in the middle of Miami and all that. But he's a very unassuming kid, wants everybody to like him. He knows everybody. Everybody that will walk by him in the hallway gives him a high five. Like, he's Mr. Popularity, even though he's a quiet kid. And that's because he pays attention to everything. He's very detail-oriented. When I mention a kid that's a recruit in Florida, he knows who he is. All I got to do is say a kid's first name.
Mm-hmm.
He knows quarterbacks. He knows every quarterback in particular.
Big-time quarterbacks pay attention to that stuff, man. And that's something that's hurt Notre Dame's receiver recruiting. Like, they got Tobias Merriweather because Tobias is a Notre Dame kid. He came into Notre Dame because of Notre Dame, not because of Del Alexander or Tommy Reese or whatever. There just aren't a lot of those type of kids. And the thing that helped Notre Dame with Tobias Merriweather is, for whatever reason, big-time schools didn't recruit him the way that they should have.
He was a freak. When I watched his film, I was like, what are y'all doing?
Right.
Why doesn't he have more offers?
And I don't get it, but I'll take it. But, you know, I was watching the show last night, and, you know, Tyreek Hill makes just a play where just that's absurd speed. Like, you know, the angles are there for them to make the tackle, and it's like, you know, like, I'm not saying Jaylen Brown has Tyreek's Hill speed because that's the NFL. Right. But, like, to me, that's the kind of impact he can have in college.
Sure.
At a place like Notre Dame. And that's just what they don't have. And they haven't. They've had one guy like that in the last 30 years, and that's Will Fuller.
Yeah.
And we saw the impact he had, right? And so that's why a guy like Jaylen Brown is a game changer, is a program changer. But again, you're going to have a much tougher time getting Jaylen Brown when you don't have a Dante Moore. And with all due respect to Chris Vizina and Jackson Arnold, I don't think they're Pied Pipers when it comes to elite offensive players. You know, maybe guys from their region.
Sure.
But I think Jackson Arnold could have a more impact getting Texas kids to go to Oklahoma than he would to get kids to go to Notre Dame, just because it's more of a regional type of situation. Dante Moore is the kind of kid, to me, Brian, and again, I'm giving you my opinion. You can say it's wrong or nuance or whatever. Dante Moore's the kind of kid that can convince kids from all over the country to come play with him at Notre Dame.
Well, based on my conversations this past weekend, that's technically fact. I mean, when I'd say Dante Moore, I didn't have not one person goes, who's that? Not one. So either they were playing coy or they knew. And most of those kids down there in Florida, they're not shy. They will ask.
Right.
One thing about Florida kids, Jaylen knows what it's like to be on both sides of it. This past year at his high school, they got a kid. He wasn't great, a little smaller, but he signed. And he's going to go play Division I football, smaller level. And they were pretty good throwing the ball. They don't have anybody going in next year. And believe me, that's a very common topic. Like, there's maybe a kid transferring or whatever that's more of a runner, etc. That doesn't make receivers happy. He will go to a place that he knows at the college level. I can just tell you this from talking to his dad and him, that he feels comfortable with the signal caller that's either already there, maybe a class ahead, or one in his class preferably. He's not going to pick a school based on what the emblem is on somebody's shirt. I know that's what Notre Dame fans want to hear. That's not how it works anymore. He's going to pick a place that he's comfy, but he can excel in football too. It has to be both, not one or the other. And quarterback is something he's going to know. Like, he knows who Dante Moore is. If Dante committed, hypothetically, I have no idea when he's going to commit. In April, not only would you probably get like that kid, you'd probably get one of the other kids, Tate, somebody else too. I mean, you could have like an all-time offensive class if Dante committed early. Again, I have no idea, because I openly asked him time frame and stuff, and he was just like overwhelmed. He has no idea. So we'll see. But Notre Dame is in the very small group, and I personally think it'll end up being Notre Dame or Michigan. That's just my opinion from talking to him.
So
and that's
we'll
where
see.
it gets interesting if Jim Harbaugh decides to leave, right?
Yeah.
That is true. I would
Yeah.
assume, is it Gaddis? Isn't he the coordinator?
Josh Gaddis.
He's done a pretty decent job.
But from everything I've read, Gaddis hasn't been the primary
Really?
driver of that recruitment. I think Harbaugh.
Oh, well, good for him. I mean, you should.
Yeah.
If Harbaugh doesn't get Dante Moore, can you imagine the backlash he will get if Dante signs with the Irish or Ohio State?
Mhm.
I mean, the two schools that fan base loathes is Notre Dame, Ohio State.
Even more reason to make it happen.
Yep.
In
So,
my
I
opinion.
mean, I get his personal interest, but we all know that Marcus
Right.
is not real shy about saying every guy is
Yeah.
my responsibility as a recruiter. This could be just entertainment-wise, a tremendous story to follow. And again, I have no idea when it'll fall out, but if you're Michigan, you have to recruit him until he tells you to leave him alone, because like Detroit King is like, they can't lose those kids. They can't.
Right. And that's the other thing I was real quick, just to clarify. Josh Gaddis is not the quarterback's coach of Michigan. They have a guy named Matt Weiss is the quarterback's coach, which would explain why he's recruiting Dante. But like maybe it's just me in the interviews I've listened to, I don't hear him talk about Josh Gaddis the way that he talks about Tommy Rees. Maybe that's just me. But he said Dante's talked a lot about in the past about his relationship with head coaches is going to be important too. And so now, you're building a relationship with Marcus Freeman. If Jim Harbaugh leaves, it's kind of like you're kind of starting over to a degree. What's up, Ryan?
Well, I was going to say to Brian Smith's point where he spoke a little bit about the comforts for Jalen, but it's a little different because I know Brian Driscoll, you have talked a little bit in the past about we need nicknames on the show, man.
Smitty.
But Smitty. All right.
Yeah, it's always been.
So what Smitty was talking about, the comforts that Jalen needs in order to find his best fits.
Mm-hmm.
I think when we talk about the fit now for a guy like a Dante Moore, Brian, you mentioned before that you think the longer that this drags out, right, that the better Notre Dame is going to be able, because they can sell the fit. They can get Marcus Freeman more involved. I think that it's going to be interesting just to see as it kind of unfolds a little bit, just how much better chances Notre Dame does get, because they can potentially self-it, because we're talking about Coach Harbaugh right now. Is he going to be back next year? Who's the main recruiters for a guy like Dante Moore? A lot of layers that I feel like Notre Dame can sell themselves and potentially maybe break that perceived tie. I'm not even going to call it a tie because I'm not going to, speculate on that. But they can make themselves the true number one player in this recruitment based upon that fit and that comfort in that fit that Notre Dame can provide.
That is 100% true. You're not going to make, and again, Jalen is not a typical Miami kid. Quiet kid, unassuming.
Yeah.
And even though he hangs around mostly Miami public school kids with immortal 7-on-7, he fits in with the Gulliver prep kids too, which is about as far apart as you're going to get. He could fit in if he went to Arkansas or he went to Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
That, again, huge gap. I mean, that's a rural public school. And then Notre Dame's, it's the worldwide private school. He's different, but now that makes it harder on him, because I talked to him at length in the article I put up on my site, Inside the Knights. He just gave me some schools, and just for as an example, I know he likes Ohio State a lot. When I asked him, name some schools, I could tell the wheels were turning. He didn't even mention Ohio State. He didn't mention Notre Dame. He mentioned 5-6 schools and just kind of random. He doesn't even care right now.
Right.
He doesn't. He's completely overwhelmed. I talked to him a few days ago, last week, when I was talking to his dad on the phone. He put Jalen on the way to school. He'd already talked to 2 coaches before 8 a.m. He is overwhelmed. And again, this is an introverted kid. He's not a big fan of it. So,
and that's, to me, again, that's why a guy like Dante Moore is so important. I mean, again, I know he doesn't have a timeline and all these kind of things, but I do think if he makes a decision tomorrow, I don't know if it would be Notre Dame. And to what Ryan was discussing too, if he makes a decision in 2-3 months, I feel much, much, much better about it, because I do think it gives them more time to develop that relationship. And I also think, again, hopefully Notre Dame can add a couple more kids to the class by then, because, when you're a quarterback too, you want to play with other great players too. I know that, it's a lot of it is, great players want to play with a great quarterback, but maybe get an offensive lineman or two. Maybe you can get a receiver that's before you get Dante, that kind of thing. I think it's important to say, hey, look, or to maybe sell to him like, listen, we're on the verge of getting so and so, so and so and so and so.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they need to know who the quarterback is, man.
It's true.
And while it might not be as big a sell as getting wide receivers like Jalen and maybe like a Cornell Tate or a Rodney Gallagher, like that type of wide receiver, I think Coach Easton coming back in the fold is definitely a big bump for Notre Dame, right? Because quarterbacks care about their ability to be kept upright, their protection. So I think Notre Dame has a lot of things that are trending in the right direction from a sell perspective. It's like you said, it's
throwing for 500 yards the last time you stepped on the football field doesn't hurt either.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I think there is a perception and there is a reality, right? We talk about perception is reality. Some think that Tommy Rees was handcuffed with what he was able to do offensively. The last time we saw Tommy Rees without Brian Kelly as the head coach, like you said, they threw for 500 yards.
Well, and really, Sami can sell the whole second half of the season because, we talk about the 500 yards thing, but in their last 3 games, Notre Dame went for 302, 341, and 509.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what they did the last 3 games. I mean, even before the 500 against Oklahoma State, you were going over 3 bills, right? And those were 2 games that were blowouts, meaning you weren't necessarily throwing a ton late in the fourth quarter. I know they threw that wheel route to Mayer to get him the record or whatever, but like you're selling that really, really, really well. And you're going to be able to say, hey, look what we did second half of the year throwing football. I mean, Jack Cohn in his last 4 games threw 12 touchdowns. Jack Cohn in his last 5 games threw for over 300 yards a game.
Mm-hmm.
That's Jack Cohn. Dante, if Jack Cohn can do that, what can you do? So I think it was important to have that late season success because I think you showed to Dante Moore, like, hey, look, we get into a game where the offense, where we can't run a ball or whatever the case may be. I got no problem spinning it 68 times. Now, I don't like that. I don't want to throw the ball 68 times. But if I'm Dante Moore, I like throwing the ball 68 times, right? But that's the big key, though, guys, is that you now have – it's not just theory now. It's not just theory of hey, we're going to throw a lot with you. Even though we've never thrown a lot, we're going to throw with you. And, I think with Dante, I don't think that's going to hurt. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to you have to lay out a vision for him. And that's why, honestly, and I've kind of hinted about this, but I'm going to say it right now. That's why I would kind of like Notre Dame to almost declare, like, see what Notre Dame's trying to do is they're trying to have the best of both worlds, which is completely a sound strategy that I would support 99 times out of 100. Because somebody asked me on the board, they said, well, what you're advocating for, isn't that the same thing that they did with Will Shipley that you didn't like? They put all their eggs in the Will Shipley basket. I said, absolutely. But at the time, Notre Dame couldn't afford to not get a quarterback or a running back, right? Their depth chart was in such a bad situation. And I liked Will Shipley a lot. He wasn't a generational player that you couldn't afford. You know what I mean? Like there was other guys that were similar ballparks as Will Shipley. So I normally don't advocate for this, but I think in this instance, you can say, hey, look, Dante, we're not recruiting Nico anymore. We're not recruiting Jackson Arnold anymore. We're not recruiting Chris Vizine anymore. We're recruiting one quarterback, and you're it. And I think that it would be smart for Notre Dame to do that. But they're trying to still be in with Chris Vizine, and they're still trying to be in the game with Jackson Arnold and trying to convince all of them that, oh, we love all you guys. And that's, again, I'm not criticizing them for that. I get that completely, and I advocate for that 99 times out of 100. You need to make all the kids that you would take feel like they're your guy, right? But in this case, I would almost make almost a public spectacle of the fact that we're not recruiting anybody else, and don't bring any other quarterbacks on for. I mean, I think that's the kind of thing. Now, it's very risky to do that, very risky. But I think Dante is going to commit soon enough that you're going to have time to still go get another good player if he commits somewhere else.
Right.
I think that's a fairly true statement. You're not going to get a replacement. There's 3 to 5 kids in this class, and it's a good quarterback class that are still above the others. And Dante for Notre Dame is the one that fits on and off the field. It is what it is. Plus, he's, again, Detroit's 3 hours from the South.
Not even well, how I drive, it's less than 3 hours.
Well, I won't make any comments about that. Anybody know that's a cop. But if you get him, again, let's say this spring, early summer, and I'm sure somebody will ask you this anyway, Jalen is not a likely early commit. Let me rephrase that. He is not a likely commit. He could commit and just get it over with because he's tired of recruiting, but I don't think he would not take visits there, which who cares anyway. Notre Dame will probably get him on campus in the fall. Is the most likely scenario. Come visit Cal or something like that, one of the early games, whatever it is, and that's fine. But just an additional point, in the class of 23, the one we're just getting ready to enter, I have him rated the #1 player in Florida. And this, in my opinion, is the best group in a single class in the state of Florida in the last decade. And the reason I say that is, number one, he's really, 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 really fast. He runs by guys like he's the first one out to practice. He runs by guys from Miami like he's the first one out for practice. It's different. And he's still a kid that's a toothpick. He's barely 170 right now because he runs track. When he gets done with track, I mean, he might run a little at Notre Dame or something just for fun. His body is going to get bigger and stronger. I don't know if it's going to improve as much as Will Fuller's did. That's one of the most unique things I've ever seen. But he'll run 4.3 when he goes to combine, barring some kind of injury to his knee. He's like Stedman Bailey, Will Fuller, etc. He has ridiculous open field speed, and it's from step one. He's been trained well in track. Like his first step, if you don't get hands on him at the line of scrimmage, you can walk off the field. It's going to be a touchdown. So the only game I saw him play this past fall, this team was really, really dumb and decided from the get-go to run cover 0 against Gulliver Prep. Now, they have guys everywhere, and the other team wasn't very good. So whoever the defensive coordinator was, I hope he was fired because that's what he deserves to do. Terrible decision. He beat a kid by 10 yards, not an exaggeration, on a go route. My dad, or his dad and I, were standing on the sidelines, and we just looked at each other like, why are they in cover 0? It was just comical.
Dude, even if the other team had A.J. Harris or Malik Muhammad, I'm not going cover 0.
Yeah, why would you cover? It's dumb. It's
well,
dumb.
That goes up to the NFL, though. You see the end of the Rams game, they're cover 0, tied football game with less than a minute left, and they go cover 0, and Cooper Kupp runs right by the safety on the inside vert. It's just like,
show there's dumb coaches at every level of football.
Right.
Well, Bowles is the coordinator for the Buccaneers, who's really respected, but
that
was not a very wise decision.
No.
Make them go 5 yards at a time.
There was so much bad defensive play calling and scheme in the end of those 2 games. It just is like,
and they didn't have a timeout either. It didn't make it was just yeah.
Anyway, before we go down that rabbit trail. So anyway, guys, I don't know. I mean, I want to respond to something in the chat. People are saying, like David Knight said, Arnold is gone, maybe a third choice. As Ryan said at the beginning of the show, Jackson Arnold, as of yesterday, still plans on visiting Notre Dame.
Yep.
Just because a kid commits somewhere doesn't mean that he's gone. And that's the funny thing about this with Notre Dame fans is when a kid commits to Notre Dame, it's like, yeah, that doesn't mean anything until he signs. But when a kid commits somewhere else, like, oh, well, he's gone, I'm not going to get him. I understand where David's coming from. I do. But Jackson Arnold still plans on visiting Notre Dame. Me personally, I'd say, hey, man, best of luck to you. Let's maybe, but I'm just telling, I think, because it's strategy, right? I mean, part of recruiting is strategy. And I would really say, like, here's why. Look, he knew, why did he commit? Because he knew that Dante was our top guy. Like, that's what I would say. Like, hey, look, we liked him, we loved him, but Dante was our top guy. I would turn into that skid. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I would do. And just, hey, look, Dante, we're not taking anybody else right now. We're not going to take anybody till we find out with you. That's why Jackson Arnold went to Oklahoma. That's why so-and-so's trending to Clemson, because they know that you're our top guy. They know I'd even say, like, they knew that even if, because I believe this to be true. I don't, no one said it directly, but I believe if they got Jackson Arnold, this is just my opinion based on some things I've inferring from comments that I made. If they got Jackson Arnold, I don't think they would have stopped recruiting Dante Moore.
That's an
if they
interesting
get Dante
question.
Moore, they're not going to keep recruiting Jackson Arnold and Chris Vizina. That's just me. Again, I haven't been told that directly, but I've been able to kind of infer from some things that that's true. And I would let that be known. Like, look, we're recruiting one quarterback, Dante. We're hanging our future on you. You know, that strategy works, in my opinion, especially for a kid like Dante, because I think Dante wants that. I think Dante wants to. I mean, and shouldn't you, if you're a big time quarterback, shouldn't you want to go to a place where they view you as, you know, hey, look, like, we want to win a championship, and you're the guy that gets us to that point in time.
Absolutely.
And I think that's just me, Brian Driscoll, what I would do. I don't know if Notre Dame, because here's that takes guts to do that. That takes conviction.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if right now Tommy Rees has the conviction in himself to go down that road.
Well, after working with a guy that likes very broad recruiting, I'm not sure that that's even in his mindset. That has to be more Marcus Freeman, even though Marcus, like, you know, for the most part gives him autonomy to recruit where he wants. Marcus goes against the other team. He knows what a good quarterback looks like. He needs to say, if we're going to do this, let's go get this kid. Now, that's partially on Marcus, too, in my opinion. And I have no idea what his opinion is.
It has to be everybody, because if you're going to put all your chips into the Dante Moore, you know, center of the Dante Moore table, the head coach has got to be part of that, because he's part of putting all your chips in. I mean, you know, like I would love for them to sit down and say, hey, look, guys, if we're going to get Dante, we need to be all in on Dante. I can't be wasting my time talking to this kid, that kid, the other. Again, this is me giving you my opinion. You know, so the people that like to listen to our show at other places and then run and tell people that we said things we didn't say, this is my opinion. Okay, you got that? You're writing that down? It's my opinion. Okay. I would say, hey, look, this is what we need to do. Dante, it's got to be Dante or bust. That's where we got to be. And so I need Coach Freeman. I need Coach Bowden. I need everybody. I need Coach Stuckey. I need Coach Easton. I need everybody as part of this. And here's our strategy. And here's what we're going to do publicly. Here's what we're going to do privately. Here's how we're going to do it. And because it's got to be all hands on deck to make it happen. It can't just be Tommy Rees. Tommy Rees is the driving force. If Notre Dame gets Dante Moore, Tommy Rees is going to get the credit for it and should. But it's got to be part of a bigger strategy to me. It's got to be the messaging has got to be the same from everybody. You're our guy. You're going to be, you know, you're the guy that's going to get us there. And look, we've been in the playoff 2 times, and guess what? We couldn't compete at the quarterback level, right? And we lost. We weren't in the playoff this year because our quarterback play in the Cincinnati game wasn't good enough, right? We weren't in the college football playoff in 2019 because our quarterback play wasn't good enough. I don't know if they'll say that, but I believe that to be true. And,
I do too.
and that's where they've got to be. They have to put all their cards on the table, and it's got to be a staff-wide decision. The kid's 3 hours away. You can go see him. You can send a different coach to his high school, and that's what I would do. I'd have Eric Easton go to his high school 1 week. I'd have Tommy the next week. I'd have Chancey the next week. I'd have whoever the running back coach is the next week. I'd have Marcus. I mean, literally, that kid's always going to see somebody. There's not a game he's going to play next year where somebody from Notre Dame's not going to be at that game. Right?
Who's your main recruiter? Everybody.
Yeah. Who have you talked to at Notre Dame? Everyone. I've had Jack Swarbrick. Have Jack Swarbrick called. I don't care. Right? That's what you need to do. You know, you need to, you know, the next 7-on-7 tournament he's in, that's during an open recruiting period, land your flipping helicopter in the practice field next to it and have Freeman and Reese and Swarbrick and everybody get it. I mean, you know, that's what you got to do, right? I mean, that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about all chips in. That means Tom Reese has got to kind of put the ego aside a little bit and say, hey, guys, I've done everything I can do and I'm going to keep doing it, but I need everybody to be on board for this. If we're going to get this, got to need everybody on board. And if you're going to run that risky strategy of it, because here's the problem. If you try to recruit all 3 of them the same way, I think you run an even greater risk of getting none of them.
I agree.
than you do if you put all your chips on the table on one of them.
To put it in perspective, Marcus has as much cachet as he's going to get, barring winning a national title. Right now, I have kids and 7-on-7 coaches down south at places that matter, randomly and unsolicited, asking me about him, telling me they're going to go visit. I had a coach at an extremely prominent program tell me that he wants 3 of his kids to go to Notre Dame now that have offers from Power 5 schools like Florida.
And it's a powerhouse high school program. You and I talked about this last night. This isn't just
this one's kind of important.
Yes.
I won't say it, but if you heard the name, you'd be like, oh,
whoa.
Every person in the country knows who this school is.
Right.
And it was just a random thing. I had a conversation with the guy.
I want, because you're not saying it, so I'm going to say it for you. You didn't ask him the question.
Right. He brought it up to
offered to you.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. You were talking about other things, and
it was random.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh.
But Brian, when was the last time that happened? When was the last time that happened? Right?
I've never heard of that.
It doesn't. Not at Notre Dame.
No. I mean,
it did a long time ago. I'm talking about for Notre Dame.
45 years ago. Yeah, when Era Parsegian was leaving the program.
It was I would argue in the late 80s, early 90s that was happening too.
Man, maybe too.
Which is why Notre Dame was able to go into Miami and get some of those. That's why they were able to beat Miami for Derek Brown and those kind of kids. But it hasn't happened since then. It hasn't happened since then. 7 kids
out of Florida one year when Miami was good.
Right.
They went all in on Florida. Vinny Serrato told me, he goes, if we were going to beat Miami, we had to get the Florida kids.
Right.
And that was the end of the conversation.
It does a twofold thing. Number one, it gives you a great player. Number two, they don't have that guy.
Yeah,
they don't have that guy. And honestly, to me, that's where I think Notre Dame can get to that to a degree. That's where I think a Chad Bowden, guys like that, can help. But to me, I'm going to circle back. Dante Moore, you have to have a guy like Dante Moore as your quarterback. You need Tyler Buckner to be successful this season. If you can get Tyler Buckner to play to his potential and land a Dante Moore, all of a sudden the recruiting game changes for Notre Dame. That's another reason why I'm going to say you have to be all in. You have to be all in on Dante Moore because he changes your program in so many different ways, on the field, off the field, all of it. And Jackson Arnold doesn't do that. It's like there's this thing now where it's like, Notre Dame's telling people that, Jackson Arnold's been a take for us all along and all this. Like, no, don't do that. Don't play that game, right? Like, don't. Because number one, it makes you look bad because you just lost in Oklahoma, number one. Number two, it's like just push them out of the center. I keep saying it again, and we're going to wrap the show up here soon. But to me, it's just – They have to, if they're going to get Dante Moore, it's going to be because they said, you know what, forget it. Love all these other kids. They're good players, but Dante's different. Yeah. And they have to look at the practical reasons of why he's different. They have to look at the big picture recruiting reasons why he's different, and say, this is the guy we got to go get. And if Tommy Rees can make that happen, it changes his entire perception as a recruiter at this point in time. And that's a big part of it too. So there's literally the drawback is if you don't get them, you're kind of screwed. Well, I would argue that right now, I think there's a better chance that the way they're doing it now, there's a better chance they miss on all 3 of them because they're trying to make it seem like, oh, we love all these guys, right? Oh, we love Arnold and Dante Moore. Well, right now you just lost one, even though, again, you're not giving up on them. But I would say do that. Let them go to Oklahoma, right? Just put it all in because right now you run the risk of missing on all of them. And that's the strategy you have. Look, that's the risk you run at quarterback when you try to make 3 guys a priority, right? Even though one guy's your top guy, but you're afraid of missing on him and getting his next 2, you end up running the risk of missing on all of them because quarterbacks decide so early now. And to me, I'd be willing to bet you a $20 that Dante Moore is going to decide after those other 2. So, that's what I would do. That's my idea. I don't, end of the day, guys, you tell me if you agree or disagree. Are you guys going all in on Dante Moore, even if, and just, hey, look, this is the only quarterback we're recruiting from this point until he decides.
Oof. I don't know.
Brian, you start first. Brian, you start first.
I don't know where they are with the kid from Alabama. And I like him as a player.
That's Chris Vizina.
Yeah, I just don't know. The only question that there is right now is the one that college football fans generically are tired of, but it's the only one that's valid. How do we beat Alabama? Every time you walk into a high school, the only thing that's valid is, does this kid, I'm going to see your kids, is this person good enough to help me beat Alabama? It's a yes or no. There is no gray area. Can you do? It's ironic because he lives right down the road from the University of Alabama.
Right.
Can he do that?
Yeah, you're gonna beat Alabama with a quarterback from Alabama that Alabama doesn't want.
Well, I would say that I am in the same spot that I was last week when we were talking about it. It's very simple. Dante Moore drop off to number 2 is way larger than the drop off from 2 to 3 or 3 to 4. That is just too big of a gap for me. So I'm going to take the chance to be excellent. I'm going to go at, if I was Notre Dame, I would take that gamble. So it's just that simple for me. You want a game changer? Go for your game changer.
Right.
Let's not play multiple sides. That's the end of the world for me. The gap is just too large for me to be comfortable going for the plan B guys. Like, let's go for A. Notre Dame, go for A.
Yeah. Well, Driscoll and I talk about this all the time. You're not going to beat Alabama unless in the game you play them, your quarterback plays at a really high level. It doesn't have to be a guy that was first-team All-American, but on that day, he's got to play at an All-American level because you're not going to out-recruit him at D-line or linebacker, and you're sure as hell not going to out-coach him. So your quarterback better light it up. I'll take my chances with Dante doing that over some of the others.
Right.
So to Ryan's point, he's correct.
Well, that's kind of what we saw in the championship game. Stetson Bennett made some big-time throws in that game. He threw for more yards in the first game, but he didn't play nearly as well. And to your point, I mean, think about the games Alabama's lost. I mean, Trevor Lawrence just made some stupid throws in 2018.
Yeah, it's not even fair.
2019, they had their own quarterback issues with Tua getting hurt and those type of things. But look, you want to beat Alabama on the big stage, you need to make big time plays, and you need a quarterback to make big time plays. And Dante, to me, can be that guy. And again, no quarterback can do it by himself. But to the point that I made earlier, you get Dante Moore, you're ensuring yourself that he won't have to do it by himself because you're going to get other big time players with him.
100%.
And that's the whole point. Dante Moore doesn't just impact the quarterback room. Dante Moore impacts the whole roster if he's as good as people think that he is. Notre Dame lost a little bit of that potential impact with Tyler Buchner for 2 reasons. Number one, he didn't play his senior year, so like a lot of that momentum that they had when Tyler committed, when he was a top 50 kind of recruit, was out the window when he didn't get a chance to play as a senior, right? And then the other part is Tyler wasn't really Dante's quiet, but Dante's engaging. There's a difference. Tyler wasn't really that guy. Again, part of it was because his final year was during the COVID year where he couldn't get on the road. He couldn't be at the Notre Dame Stanford home game or the Notre Dame USC home game in 2020 would have been a Notre Dame home game against Stanford. He couldn't be at that game. He couldn't be at the Notre Dame Clemson game in 2020 where all the other big-time recruits were, where he could convince kids to come play with him because of COVID. That hurt them too. But you lost some of that with Tyler Buchner being your quarterback. But look at the talent they got in that class after they got him. You got two pretty good running backs in that class. You got Lorenzo Styles, you got Deion Colsey, you got Kane Barong, you got Blake Fisher, you got Rocco Spindler. And part of it was because you had a big-time quarterback in that class, even though he wasn't the guy that really necessarily was a super, super active recruiter, right? Dante will be a more involved recruiter. He said so in the past. He said, look, I understand that, you want to pick a school sooner rather than later because you can help. I watched him say this, right? Last spring. I've heard him say it again, that he understands I got to make this decision on my time frame, but I also understand that I want to try to make it sooner rather than later because I know the impact that where I go is going to have on the rest of the class. He's very aware of that. He knows that. I know that. You know that. I know Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees know that. At the end of the day, Notre Dame is going to have to make that happen. Here's the super chat, and I'll kind of end on this. Brandon asked, thanks for the super chat, Brandon. Is NIL factored all in Dante? If so, then I don't feel so good about Notre Dame. It may be dangerous to go all in with him, maybe keep Johnson on the back burner. Can I address this real quick? Mm-hmm. Number one, Notre Dame is not going to offer the guaranteed cash that other schools are doing. A, because it's illegal. B, stop assuming that every kid is looking for that. Number two. Number three, Dante Moore is a smart kid. There is no more high-profile position in all of college football than the quarterback at Notre Dame. Okay? He knows that there will be plenty of money to be made if he's the starting quarterback at Notre Dame. Because Notre Dame doesn't offer, hey, we're going to give you this like A&M does, doesn't mean that that's what he's going to do. Number one. Number two, Michigan's not doing that either. And that's the main competition for him. So Dante Moore, and like a lot of kids at his position, is not I'm going to the highest bidder situation. Caleb Williams may be that way. He's a bit of a unicorn, in my opinion. Most kids understand I'm going to go somewhere, and I'm going to make money that way. Dante Moore, believe me, trust me on this. Dante Moore is very well aware of the financial opportunities that will exist for him if he picks Notre Dame. And most of these kids are smarter than I think we give them credit for, especially Dante Moore, where we're going to offer you X dollars and to come and, okay, I'm going to take X dollars. Most kids, especially kids that like Notre Dame, those kids aren't going to Notre Dame anyway, okay? Because they were taking the under the table stuff before, right? You think that Notre Dame was the school that offered the biggest guaranteed money to Tyson Ford and Jalen Sneed and Josh Burnham and schools and Tobias Merriweather? You don't think those kids were getting money off for some schools? Of course they were. Okay. What I'm trying to say, and Brandon, there's nothing wrong with your question because that's some of the uncertainty of this NIL world, right? So, I mean, I'm not coming down on you. What I'm trying to explain to people is we got to stop thinking that every kid is just going to go to the highest bidder. That's not the case for all the kids. It's definitely not the case for kids that are already looking at Notre Dame legitimately. And a quarterback especially. I've read multiple articles that said Kyle Hamilton was one of the highest paid college players this year in NIL. The difference is Notre Dame isn't offering that illegally. There is facilitation that happens, but it's done within the framework of the rules. And if Kyle Hamilton as a safety is going to make that kind of money, what is a potential All-American quarterback at Notre Dame going to make? And I'll repeat again, Ian Book finished in the top 10 in Heisman Trophy voting in a year where he threw 15 freaking touchdowns. All right? Like, imagine what a kid like Dante Moore is going to do. And that's the whole point. Those are the opportunities that are there. And just because Notre Dame isn't offering, there's this misconception that because Notre Dame isn't offering kids money the same way Texas A&M is that Notre Dame is not doing anything with NIL. And I'm here to tell you that is 100% not true. Jason Adamiola and Justin Adamiola had multiple pretty good deals before they were ever even starters because they got deals last year before the season even started. Isaiah Foskey has his own clothing line. Kyle Hamilton had his own clothing line, right? And those are the things that these kids at Notre Dame are making money.
Yep.
They're just not doing it the way that A&M is doing it, where they're basically handing kids cash. You come here and you're going to guaranteed get this. NIL is not going to be the reason Dante Moore doesn't pick Notre Dame. He's smarter than that, and there's a lot more money to be made at Notre Dame than people realize. It's just that Notre Dame isn't promoting it the way that an A&M is promoting it, and that's the reality of the situation.
And I also think it doesn't just come down to handouts, right? Like it's education on the way to maximize NIL, which Notre Dame is open to, helping their athletes maximize that earning opportunity. You just mentioned Kyle Hamilton. Like he's a perfect example for a guy that maximized it well. There is a lot more earning opportunities than just that first handout that you're going to get from a university. I think that, again, that goes back to the fit. What can Notre Dame offer you? We know the education aspect, but then also the education of marketing yourself, of being advised properly to take advantage of the opportunities that are in front of you. I think that's something that I think there's a little misconception with how that works.
Because that's the selling point, right? Hey, look, you come here and let's say you're able to make $100,000. right? And I just had a source tell me that the twins, Jason and Justin Adamiola, are on pace to make 6 figures this year in different deals.
Yep.
Justin's not even a starter at Notre Dame, right? But the point is, if those were 2 twins at Georgia Tech, nobody cares. But they're Notre Dame, right? If you're the starting quarterback at Notre Dame, there's going to be tons of opportunities. So let's say that Dante's able to make $200,000 in Notre Dame. There's about 100-some business majors in the Mendoza School of Business that are going to be – you're going to be rooming with and then dorms with and taking classes with at Notre Dame that eventually are going to become your agent, right, or your business guy like they did with Brandon Wimbush. And all of a sudden at Notre Dame, that $200,000 turns into 5, turns into 6, just because of the opportunities that Notre Dame can provide you. And so you can go and say, I'm going to take $1 million and just, graduate early so I can go get $1 million in some stupid, Texas food chain and go to Ohio State, not play for a year. Now I'm transferring back to Texas and everybody thinks I'm a head case, right? Everybody knows what I'm talking about there, right? There's opportunities for Notre Dame kids to make a lot of money. Notre Dame just doesn't broadcast it that way. I don't think I think they do need to do more in letting people know what these kids are making. But at the same time, there's also risk there, because if you start telling everyone this kid's making this kid's making that, that's when the vultures come in, right? And so it's a tricky situation in my opinion. But trust me, Dante Moore knows that there are 6 to 7 figure money opportunities for him if he's the quarterback at Notre Dame. He knows that. And if he doesn't know that, then he's not smart enough to be the quarterback of Notre Dame. But I'm telling you, he's smart enough to be the quarterback of Notre Dame. He knows that. People just have to understand that. This whole thought of, well, if Notre Dame wants to get big-time players, they got to do what Texas A&M is doing. Y'all, Texas A&M has been throwing around this kind of money to big-time recruits for decades. Decades. They're just doing it out in open now. Decades. There are kids on Notre Dame's roster today, I guarantee you, Brian, you will back me up on this, that were offered 5-6 figure deals coming out of high school before NIL. They still came to Notre Dame because a lot of kids get it. They get it. So, and I'm going to tell you something, when he's on campus next time, I'm making sure Jerome Bettis is on campus too. I mean, because he's in school now. So I just wanted to kind of get that. Brandon, this is a good, I'm glad you brought it up. I'm not coming at you, right, at all. But what I'm telling you is I think there's this misconception about how NIL is going to be impacted at Notre Dame. This is going to be a good thing for Notre Dame. They're still figuring out how to properly market it, but Notre Dame has a lot of kids making money. A lot of Notre Dame's offensive linemen are making good money this past year, right? And they weren't even good, right? Trust me. Like
that's true.
Trust me, if Harry Heastand builds another 2012 or 2015 or 2017 offensive line, they're all going to be making bank. They know that. Kids know that. Dante knows that. And that's why I think Notre Dame can improve the messaging. And I wish they would improve the messaging because that would help me not have to address this 87,000 times on the message board and on Twitter and DMs. And I'm glad, Brandon, that you asked the question so we could get into it. But it's just Notre Dame's in a better place with NIL than people realize. And I'm going to – this last super chat, and then we're going to wrap the show up. Matt, 2011 GT, I just thought this was a perfect way to end the show. I'm with Brian on this one. Reese needs to go all Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross, and get him to sign on the line that is dotted or hit the bricks. You want to coach here? Close. And I think that is a great way for us to close in that, again, this is a tremendous opportunity for Tommy Rees and Marcus Freeman to show their bona fides as recruiters. If you are the big-time coaches and the big-time players that you think you are and that I think they are, and I think Ryan thinks that Marcus Freeman is for sure. We haven't talked about Tommy Rees. I know Brian knows full well the impact Marcus Freeman is having on the recruiting trail just by his sheer presence without him even being involved with these kids. This is the kind of one that you have to make. Jackson Arnold's a good football player. Flipping him from Oklahoma does not change the complete trajectory of your football program. Chris Vizina I actually like Chris Vizina a little bit more than Jackson Arnold because I think he's got the frame. I think he's got a better arm. He's got more upside. I think Jackson's a better player now. I think Vizina's got more upside, okay? They're both very good quarterbacks, and they would both be the second best they'd be the second most talented quarterback on the roster when they arrive, with Tyler Buchner being better. Dante Moore is different from them in that he changes the complete trajectory of your program. And when you have a chance for a kid like that, you got to do everything you can to make it happen. Simple
100%.
as that. And if they do that, I think they got a chance to get him. And if they get him, then things change, right?
Mhm.
And that's where I'm at. So that is going to be it for today's show. Ryan, you and I'll be back together. Is it going to be Wednesday night? Have we decided on that yet?
Wednesday night. Yep.
And that show is going to be a recruiting show, but it's going to be a little different. We're going to dive into film. We're going to get into big boards. I know Brian Smitty's going to be politicking to get on those shows because he likes nothing else better than to dive into the film and talk ball. So,
That is true.
We'll definitely have Brian as part of those shows at times. Sometimes it's just going to be Brian and Ryan. Sometimes it's just maybe Ryan. But we're going to dive more into film and breakdowns and analysis, and we're going to completely nerd out on it, which is what we love to do. And that's a big part of the reason I hired Ryan, because he likes to nerd out on that stuff just like I do. And we'll go over boards. We're going to break down the boards at each position group from an analysis standpoint. We're going to break down some of the kids that are committed to Notre Dame and all those type of things. So that's also part of our new schedule. So Monday, recruiting show. Friday, we have the new podcast, the new mailbag that's kind of split into two. Wednesday night is going to be a recruiting breakdown type of show, right? Because, I mean, what's the name of our freaking channel? It's Irish Breakdown. If we're not nerding out and getting into the weeds of this stuff, then we've lost our mission of what makes us different and makes us the best. And so we will definitely start doing that on Wednesday nights, and I can't wait for that. So I believe it's probably going to be 8 o'clock. We haven't completely nailed down the time, but that's why you have to hit – Brian, I'm going to take you out of here because I need to show something. That's why you need to hit the like button. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share, because when you hit the notification bell, it means that I'm going to bring Brian back in. I just had to kick you out because I had to show that cool graphic that I made, and I finally figured out how to use Canva. But that's the kind of thing. If you hit the notification bell, when we announce that this is when the show is going to be and I sign it, you automatically get notified that that's when the show is. And so you definitely want to take advantage of that. Sign up for the message board, boards.irishbreakdown.com. Like, share, hit the notification bell, subscribe to the channel. Check out irishbreakdown.com, all that great stuff. We have a ton going on. You're definitely going to be a part of it. So Brian Smith, thank you so much for being on the show today. Ryan Roberts, appreciate the show with you guys today. Everybody, thanks for joining us. We will be back with you again in less than 24 hours for the next edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast.